We are live on a Monday edition of the Sports Bash, 97.3 ESPN, the 97.3 ESPN free mobile app, live video streaming on the X platform and on YouTube at Mike Gill Show. What's up, everybody? I'm your host, Mike Gill. Josh Eddings producing today's show. You out there. Well, it's the first Monday where we don't have a football game to either get ready for or recap. The football season is officially over, and the NBA had their chance to grab you, and instead they vomited all over themselves last night. From start to finish, NBA All-Star Weekend was a utter flop. I tried, man. I tried Friday night. I tried Saturday. I gave it a shot yesterday. I gave you 3 shots, and in the baseball world, 3 strikes, you're out. That was an abomination last night. They got to be kidding me with that. The NBA had a product and found a way to make it worse. Kudos to them for absolutely just taking the chance to step into the spotlight for the moment and absolutely failing immensely. Now, I'm not one to sit here and really care because I don't watch NBA All-Star games. They've been such a disaster. But I was kind of like, you know what? There was really nothing on. I was like, let me take a I don't even know what the format was. I don't know how they got to the 4 teams. Quite frankly, I don't even care. How did they come up with the 4 teams? I know one was the young ones, one was the OGs, the other one was this team, and the other one was that team. It was horrible. And I do actually kind of like the target score thing. You know why? Because it got the game over faster. It was the only thing that was like, all right, at least the game is over. The whole thing with, it was cringy watching Kevin Hart. Enough with Kevin Hart, okay? How does Kevin Hart keep getting jobs? Enough with Kevin Hart. It was awful to watch him do the whole thing with the fishing thing, and I get it. The TNT guys are gone. And then they brought in Vogue out there. Where did they find in Vogue? Holy mackerel. It was just a terrible, terrible night for the NBA. The only game, actually, that had some interest was the young guys against the old guys, because the old guys actually played a little hard because I think they didn't want to be the team that got embarrassed by the young guys. But then once all the young guys left the court and it was the old guys against the old guys again, you went right back down the same road of nobody caring, and it's just terrible. It's just sad that that's the product. And then, you got this 4 Nations thing going on. Over 4 million people watch that, and, you're looking at maybe the NBA goes down that road. Is it, U.S. against the world stars? I don't know that the U.S. wants to do that either because they probably get pummeled by the world stars. I mean, right now, USA basketball against the world is probably not a good idea for them either. So I don't know what they do. It's another All-Star game that, as young kids used to get ready and excited for the All-Star weekend, and it's a shame that is what it is. I asked, I was at the house this week. I said, anybody interested in the slam dunk contest? No. Anybody want to watch the three-point competition? No. Anybody want to watch No. Anybody want to watch? Nothing. Nobody any interest in it. And I turned it on last night just because, literally there was nothing on. I have YouTube TV, so it recommends stuff for you, and because I watch a lot of TNT NBA, that's what was the top recommendation, and I'm looking around and it's like either that or what else is going on in the world, which I don't really want to listen to right now. So I turned that on and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is really bad. The court, I don't need the court being blue and yellow. It was another reason that everybody in the room was like, this court is hurting my eyes, get it off. I saw an interesting tweet last night, and I'm interested to see what people think about this tweet. And it's from a guy named Brian Geltzeiler. He is a host on Sirius XM NBA radio. And he's basically mentioning how we got to this point, okay? And I thought this was an interesting take. LeBron opts out of the game the day of the game. So he writes this. The fact that the NBA has had to resort to this format is a clear indictment of the league's 3 standard bearers, LeBron, Curry, and Durant. Kobe handed this to LeBron, and he didn't carry it forward, and the other two didn't pick it up. Darius Garland told us on Sirius XM NBA radio that he wasn't planning on playing hard, but if Curry did, he would. The younger guys are looking for some guidance on how to approach the All-Star game, and the three standard bearers have dropped the ball. It's a pretty interesting takeaway. Steph Curry wins the All-Star Game MVP last night, another embarrassment. The whole thing was a joke. The whole weekend is a mess. The NBA's got big problems, but they really don't care. They just got an 11-year, $76 billion television deal, and they're just laughing all the way to the bank. But, guess what? That game last night was not entertaining. So, with that, what is entertaining? Super Bowl 59, very entertaining. Somebody texted in, 609-403-0973. USA-Canada hockey game was on Saturday. It was the most watched hockey game since 2019. Here's the sad part. I bet you the All-Star weekend probably outdrew the hockey games this weekend, which people are like, the hockey game had over 4 million people, and that NBA slot probably had 6 to 8 million people watching it. It's a sad state of affairs. But this is the state of sports right now without football. It's a rough climb between now and training camp until, baseball kind of gets here. I know that when the Phillies are good, people, want to follow this Phillies team, but they're getting dangerously down the path of if they don't do what the Eagles were able to do, they're going down the path of becoming what the Sixers have become. You got the Sixers in the middle of a disastrous season right now. I honestly, this might be, the process years, the Sixers, weren't intending on winning any games. Their intent was to, kind of struggle, look for some young, cheap pieces, gather draft picks, and hope to hit on those draft choices in hopes of finding players that would become superstars. So those years don't really count in terms of they were trying. 2012, the Sixers were trying. 2011, the Sixers were trying. 2010, the Sixers were trying. 2009, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2. Every season after they went to the NBA Finals in 2000, 2001, they were actually trying and weren't very good. This has to be the worst season of Philadelphia 76ers basketball going back to 2002. Because, there were times where they were trying, they just weren't that good. They were trying to be good. They were about 500. You didn't really think any of those teams had championship aspirations. There was no time, 2002 up to 2012, where you're like, this team's going to win the NBA championship or has a chance to. This team here, you thought could make a run to the NBA Finals. This is the worst season in 25 years. And that includes one where they were one of the worst teams in NBA history. That's how bad this Sixers season has been. So this is where the Eagles handed us off to. The worst Sixers season in 25 years. A Phillies team that really has a lot of pressure on them. A lot of pressure on them. This Phillies team has a ton of pressure because the Eagles winning that Super Bowl, the Phillies need to get this done because if they don't get it done, what's next for them? And quite frankly, anybody entering spring training feeling that this Phillies team is going to make it to a World Series, I don't think so. There's very little. I get it. The Eagles just won a Super Bowl, so you're not in baseball mode. You're not thinking about it. But if you had a World Series contending team, don't you think you would have a little bit of excitement when the team went down to Clearwater? And especially the Eagles just had their parade on Friday. I can't find anybody buzzing about this Phillies team at all yet. So you got the worst Sixers season in over 25 years. You've got a Phillies team that right now feels a little bit like it's hitting the apathy button. Now, I'm not saying it's that bad quite yet, but no buzz or juice around the Phillies at spring training quite yet. They all reported they're ready to go this Saturday. They've got games, maybe once they get out there, but it has the feeling of a fan base that says, I've seen this script before, and I'm not all that excited about it. And then you have the Flyers, who don't play another game until Saturday, by the way, who are just kind of stuck in mediocrity right now. So this is where we are in the winter, which is kind of almost done, by the way. Can we get through 2 more weeks of February? We turn that calendar over to March. We get to spring training. So where are you in your sports mind? I got to imagine most people out there, if I was to rank what sports stories in the Philadelphia market right now you had the most interest in, it might be, 1, who replaces Kellen Moore, and then 2, what happens in free agency? Zach Baun, Milton Williams, Josh Sweat, Mekhi Becton, Kenny Gainwell, couple others. What happens with them? And then what can the Eagles do to improve this team to make another run? Are they not the most intriguing sports stories, or are you more interested in Phillies, Sixers, Flyers, or something else? That's where we get today's show started. It was a sad weekend of sports. It really was.
You know, Mike, when I was down in Sea Isle on Saturday for the Mike Seafood Run Walk for Autism, you saw as much green as you would at a game. People were wearing Eagles hats, shirts, hoodies, socks, scarves. And the only team that was represented all weekend when I was out, Mike, that wasn't the Eagles was the Phillies. I didn't see a single Sixers or Flyers anything anywhere.
Nope.
And
no surprise, by the way.
And I think it just goes to prove your point that right now this area is still on the high of a Super Bowl championship, and the other teams are basically the forgotten stepchildren. Basically, it's amazing just this huge gap that's going on. And
well, that's listen, it's to be expected when you win a Super Bowl. But when one season ends, the excitement of something else now I get it. You win the Super Bowl, it's hard to focus on, but there's nothing right now. And that includes the Phillies. The Phillies should be a team that we're all pumped up. You just saw a Super Bowl. Now you should be excited about, I want to win a World Series. That was so cool. I want to win a World Series. And it's almost though, hey, you win the Super Bowl, and that's bigger than a World Series. And this team, it feels like not a lot of people really think this is a Super Bowl team, a World Series team.
But instead, you know what I've gotten all weekend, Mike, was who do you think the next offensive coordinator is? Are they going to keep Zach Baun? Are they going to keep Mekhi Becton? People are already asking questions about the Eagles offseason. They're not asking questions about what do you think about the Phillies.
Well, that's what I just said. The biggest sports stories right now, it's not the Phillies, it's not the Sixers, it's not the Flyers. It is who replaces Kellen Moore and what happens with the free agents. They right now are the stories that most people that I have talked to, they're the ones that people want answered. Phillies, I'll believe in them when I see it. You're almost getting the Phillies are almost becoming the Sixers. Now, they're a little different because they have got out of that second round, but much like the 2008 team that won the World Series, in 2009, they went to the World Series and lost. In 2010, they went to the NLCS and lost. And then they got knocked out. They progressively got knocked out one round earlier. And this is where the Phillies are without a World Series. They get to the World Series, they lost. They get to the NLCS, they lost. And last year, they get knocked out in the division round. Is it far-fetched? We're going to talk to Bob Wankel about this. Bob's back for another baseball season at 3:25 today. Is it far-fetched to say this Phillies team went to a World Series loss, NLCS and loss, Division Series and loss, don't make the playoffs? Are we down that potential? Because what did we talked, I guess we were talking to Frank Close. Maybe Frank. I can't remember 100%. We're talking baseball. Oh, McGarry. We're talking to McGarry.
Oh, on Friday.
And he mentioned the Mets and the Braves both got significantly better than last year. There's 3 teams in the National League East, and there's a good chance one of them doesn't make it. Are the Phillies that one? Are they better than the Braves? Are they better than the Mets? Where are you guys out on that? I know your brain isn't locked into baseball yet, but as baseball has started and football had no games this weekend, there's no football to react to. If you look at the NL East, do you look at the Phillies as the team that makes the playoffs or on the outside looking in? 609-403-0973.
If I got to be honest, Mike, I think they're a playoff team, but I don't know if they win the division. I don't think this team is built for the 162. I think they're more so built for the postseason run at this point. I think that they're going to have
You got to get in first.
I think
you might be built for a postseason run, but you got to get in first. And there is more competition in the National League East specifically. But keep in mind, the Dodgers are getting in. So that's one playoff team.
Yep.
You know that.
They'll win their division.
That Western division is competitive. San Diego's pretty good. Yep. Arizona's kind of like a sleeper team. Not a lot of people, but they went to the National League Championship Series. Or the World Series, I should say, 2 years ago.
Yeah.
You know what team in the Central has to get in. So you've already got 2 teams pretty much locked in. Could you get 2 wild card teams from the East? Sure. But it's not a fait accompli. That's
definitely not a fait accompli. But I do think that the acquisition of Luzardo gives me a little more faith that they're going to at least be better with their pitching depth this year than last year, because my working assumption, Mike, has always been that we won't see Andrew Painter to begin the year, but we will see him before the trade deadline.
We're not going to see Painter before the deadline. Nope, we're not going to see him probably until July.
Right. So
I mean, really, this team added Jesus Luzardo. That's what they did, and they downgraded their bullpen. So is Jesus Luzardo and downgrading the bullpen. Now, it seems, and we're going to talk to Bob about this, it seems, and we'll talk to McGarry about it as well, it seems pretty much like a lock, I want to say, that you will see Trey Turner hit leadoff. It seems that that's the direction they're going to go. And I've said this before, if you're going to keep the same team, same roster, you got to shake something up.
Right.
And that doesn't mean I think that Kyle Schwarber shouldn't hit leadoff or can't hit leadoff. No, they've hit him leadoff, and it hasn't worked for them for whatever reason. They win a lot of games with him there, but you got to shake something up. So Turner goes to the leadoff spot. I think Bryce Harper had said, I'll hit in the 2 spot. He said, I don't want to hit leadoff. I think he kind of hinted that.
Yeah, he was pretty much suggested that leadoff is of no interest to him, basically.
Yeah, so it looks like the lineup, and I wrote about this over at 97.3ESPN.com in my 5 spring training questions. And the lineup that I put out there was Turner, Harper, Bohm, Schwarber, Castellanos. That looks like the 5 guys that you're going to get in some order. And then 6, 7, 8, 9, I don't know what they're going to do there. You could hit Stott 6, Kepler 6, so you can keep that left, right all the way through. You get JT hitting 7th. Then you've got who am I missing?
Whoever plays center field.
The center fielder, I think, would be in the 9 hole. Oh, the guy who doesn't hit 6 would hit 8th.
Right.
So you would have Kepler or Stott hitting 6, right, and Kepler or Stott, the one who doesn't hit 6, would hit 8th. And then the center fielder would hit 9th.
Yeah. Right. And the center fielder, this whole thing with them they might be getting Sosa prepared to be the center fielder. You know, they're Rojas, I guess, is still in the conversation, but who really knows? It's such a weird situation that I still don't understand what their plan was this offseason. Like, it almost felt like their offseason was they didn't have a plan.
I think their plan was we're going to run it back, and at one of these playoff series, the offense will click. We're there. We're knocking on the door. One of these playoff series, the offense will click for us. And if we had, I mean, they obviously felt. I don't see the whole Luzardo thing. It's not that he's fine. I know I'm not like. Did they really look at their pitching staff and say we needed more pitching? Like, I get it. You had a spot in the 5 spot in the rotation that was a problem for you last year, but I don't know. Maybe they looked at the Mets and Braves being better and that they couldn't just hand the 5th game over every single week. So they added a guy who will make them more competitive in those games. But if you looked at this team and said, well, what failed us? You're telling me the number 5 spot in the rotation was the problem for this team?
No, the hitting failed you. The hitting was the problem in multiple postseason losses now. And I don't understand why adding Max Kepler solves anything.
Yeah, the Kepler thing didn't do anything for me. It's another left-handed bat. The fact that, hey, I don't know that Randall Grichuk has signed yet. I would be more interested in him playing left field, or at least a Kepler and Grichuk, platoon. He's a right-handed bat who just absolutely murders left-handed pitching. I wrote an article about that a little while ago that, hey, he's on the market. How about bringing him into the mix? They did not do enough. They didn't do anything offensively. The bullpen, to me, has taken a step back. 609-403-0973. 609-403-0973. It's the Sports Bash live on 97.3 ESPN, the 97.3 ESPN free mobile app, and live video streaming on the X platform and on YouTube. At Mike Gill Show, you can subscribe on YouTube at Mike Gill Show and watch the show live each and every day. Now, listen, I get it. There's a lot of Phillies fans out there who are excited about this Phillies team, but I think even the people that are excited do acknowledge that this Philly – I get a lot of text messages coming in, so maybe people are more excited about the Phillies than I'm giving them credit for. And I like to say that. Mike, I want to say it's a 50-50 for the Phillies to get in if they don't choke on how they've been. I don't know what that means, but, yeah, I mean, they choked in the playoff. They've been a pretty good regular season team, but as we know in sports, no one cares about how good you are in the regular season. Another text message on the Phils. To quote Bryce Harper, quote, you still have to play the games. Anything can happen regardless of talent on paper. Joey D in Ventnor City. Yeah, listen, this team is talented enough to win a World Series, but they're not the best team. I think we can all acknowledge that. The Dodgers are by far the best team. This team is talented enough. Are they better than the Braves? Are they better than the Mets? That, I think, is a definite question. We compare those guys up throughout the offseason. Phil chimes in and says, Mike, I'm 100% all Eagles for me. Free agency, who to keep, offensive coordinator, and the draft. I personally will not watch a Sixers or Flyers game the rest of the year. I can't focus on the Phillies. They really disappointed last year, and now they're getting older and worse. Plus, everyone else got better in the National League. Maybe in April when the weather changes. Go Birds, says Phil. Yeah, I think a lot of people like you, Phil, that said the Phillies have kind of disappointed me, so I'm going to kind of keep my distance on them. But as I say, I wrote an article for 97.3ESPN.com about spring training questions, and there was a ton of reaction to it. We had a lot of people read the article, so there are Philly fans out there. But I think those Phillies fans have some caution. But I do see you guys texting in. Are you ready to turn the page to the Phillies, or is there another sports story that you're more interested in? Is it the Eagles offseason? How about Jeff at Ocean City? He says, I love March Madness, but it looks like this will be my last dance. They probably will expand to 78 next year, which adds more below average Power 5 teams and less chance for a Cinderella story. Jeff, you know me. I love the tournament. I absolutely love it. 78 teams, I agree with you, waters down everything. Although, it would give me 2 more days of hoops down in Clearwater that we've talked about this before. Like, if they start on a Tuesday and have games on all day, I just don't know if my liver can handle Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, noon to midnight. That's a lot. Jeff at Ocean City, always appreciate the text. 609-403-0973. Should we put our passion and belief in the Phillies? Mike McGarry from the Press of Atlantic City, pressofac.com, joins me next right here on the Sports Bash on 97.3 ESPN. 231 Sports Bash Live, 97.3 ESPN, the 97.3 ESPN free mobile app, live video streaming on the X platform and on YouTube. At Mike Gill Show, subscribe, watch the show. We've got a whole bunch going on. Phillies are officially back. Everybody's reported, although a couple guys had food poisoning, Bryce Harper among them. Right now, Mike McGarry from the Press of Atlantic City, pressofac.com. First Monday, Mike, no football. What is the top sports story you are moving on to without any football?
Wow, good question, right? We kind of missed that football yesterday, but we had Saturday Night Live to sort of fill the gap last night. I don't know what we're going to do next Sunday. I guess from my perspective, I'm starting to pay a little bit more attention to some college basketball nationally and kind of check back in with the NBA and start to figure that out, on the professional level. And then, high school wise, we're getting to the semifinals of the Cape Atlantic League tournament and the final this Saturday, and then the state tournament in basketball. So, those would be kind of the things on my radar right now. But I miss that football.
Yeah. One thing you did not mention was the Phillies or baseball. Are the Phillies going down the road, Mike, of the Sixers where people are like, too long of a season for me to jump on board the whole way. I'll believe in you when it's time.
Yeah, I don't think so, Mike. I didn't mention it because they're not playing real games yet, but I think everybody loves, especially on a day like today, everybody loves to turn on their TV and get the pictures of the boys down there in Clearwater, working out in the sun and the warm weather and stuff like that. But I just think baseball spring training goes forever. I'll start getting more into the baseball season and kind of examining it in depth as we get closer to opening day on March 27th or 28th. But to me, spring training is more or less every sport has changed the way they sort of prepare for the season. Baseball is still preparing the same way they prepared when Joe DiMaggio played for the New York Yankees. So these guys don't need 6-7 weeks to get ready. It's kind of a tourism thing for the state of Florida. So I'll check back in with spring training, as we get closer to the actual start of the season.
Yeah, I tweeted that out, like how it's funny how other leagues are all shortening their springs or exhibition seasons, and baseball, here we are, they're still playing a whole month. They still have, the guys down there from the middle of February to the end of March. And no one's ever brought up, hey, maybe we should shorten this thing. But you can't play any more than 162. That's already a drag. Let's get some Phillies thoughts from you, because this Phillies team, I think it was you that said it last week, Mets, Braves, both improved. Is it even a guarantee that the Phillies are a playoff team this year?
Well, I think they're going to get in. They're one of the best 6 teams in the National League on paper. So if you're asking me right now, do I think the Phillies are going to make the postseason, I'm going to say yes. However, I stand by what I said last week to you, and I think one of those 3 teams, the Phillies, the Mets, and the Braves, are not going to have the season that we anticipate them having. And I think the reason is going to be injuries. And you look at one of the things, I looked at spring training today, the Mets pitcher, Frankie Montas, lat strain out, will miss all of spring training, and, will then need to ramp back up once he's out 6 or 7 weeks. So the injuries maybe have already started for the Mets. But I think both those teams have a lot of good players. Both those teams have a lot of players who are kind of old, in quotes, by baseball standards. And I can just see injuries coming out of nowhere to wreck one of the 3 team seasons.
Mike McGarry from the Press of Atlantic City, pressofac.com. So I had just asked you earlier, do we think that the Phillies fans are starting to get down that Sixers road where, I'm a little bored? But did they do enough this offseason for you to say, yeah, they're really going for it? Or like they basically said, we added Jesus Luzardo. Are you telling me that they looked at their team and said, why did we lose to the Mets? Well, we didn't have a 5th starter. I get it. The 5th starter spot was a problem for them. But is that why they lost to the Mets?
No, they lost to the Mets because, the Mets were playing well at the time. And, again, they lost to the Mets because of what has seemed to happen every postseason is the bats go quiet and they chase pitches out of the strike zone. and yada, 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 the offense sort of goes stale. I can see to a degree the excitement. It's just like anything with the fans. I mean, they're excited about you make the playoffs once. You go to the World Series, there's a lot of enthusiasm. You do that 3 years in a row, you make the playoffs, you take a step back each season. I can see the fans having a little bit of a show-me attitude, but I still think this Phillies team is one of the best teams in baseball on paper. Yeah, they tweaked around the edges because they didn't want to break up the core. I agree with that. I'm going to give this core one more chance. I think at the end of this season, depending on how this season plays out, I think you're going to see changes just naturally. Guys are getting older. Real Muto's in the contract year. Schwarber's in the contract year. Castellanos coming to the end of his deal. So I can see why they kept this core together. I agree with it and give it one more chance. Tweak around the edges. I think Jordan Romano can be a big addition if he stays healthy out of the bullpen. I like Luzardo. I think he can project better than a number 5 starter if he stays healthy. So I think the Phillies have done a lot of good. However, I agree that keeping the core together this year, and I can see at the end of this season, if it doesn't end with a World Series appearance, there's going to be bigger changes, this time next year.
Well, Mike, some of the changes I think I want to get your take on it. I know they really haven't started games yet, but is the indication that you're feeling or getting that we will see a change to the lineup?
Yeah, I think you are going to see it. And Mike, I don't necessarily agree with it. I like Kyle Schwarber batting leadoff. Maybe I'm in the minority, but I like how he puts the opposing pitcher in the deep end of the pool right away. You make a mistake to your typical leadoff hitter, it might be a single or a double. You make a mistake to Kyle Schwarber, and the ball is in the second deck in right field. I like how he puts pressure on that pitcher right from the start. However, I do think they're going to maybe move Trey Turner up into that lineup spot. And in fairness to Trey Turner, he's got power, he's got pop, he can hit a home run, he can capitalize on a mistake and hit the ball over the fence. I don't think you'll see Schwarber drop any lower than number 4 in the order, because then I think you start taking at bats away from him, and you don't want to do that with a guy who can hit 50 home runs.
No, it seems, Mike, it's going to be a Turner, Harper, Bohm, Schwarber, Castellanos 1 through 5, and then some, configuration of like Stott, Real Muto, Kepler, and then whoever plays center field 6, 7, 8, 9. But that looks like the 1 through 5 that they're going to at least toy with here in spring training.
Yeah, I can see that lineup. I like that lineup. It looks good on paper. I just don't know how much of a difference it's going to make as far as run production over the course of a season. We will see how it turns out. You get a little bit more speed up there with Turner. You get Harper up in the 2-hole. You get Bohm in the 3-hole, and Schwarber coming up with some people on base. So maybe some of those 50 home runs or more of those 50 home runs are 2-run, 3-run shots rather than solo shots. Hey, I think it's, to me, it's 6-1, half a dozen the other. I think the lineup is good with Schwarber at the top. I think it's good with Turner at the top. I'm not so sure how much of a difference it'll make. We'll see how it plays out.
All right, Mike McGarry from the Press of Atlantic City. Did you watch any All-Star weekend, All-Star game last night at all?
I did not watch the NBA All-Star game at all because, to me, that is an atrocity and an affront to the game of basketball. I did watch the hockey game on Saturday night, which is amazing, when you contrast the energy and intensity and passion and the hockey players brought to their sort of all-star games. And I understand they're playing for their country compared to what the NBA did last night. I don't even know what that was. Team Charles Barkley versus Team Kenny Smith. I don't have time for that nonsense. That's an affront to the game of basketball.
I agree. So we'll transition in. The Sixers are 20-34. They are 2.5 games out of the 10 spot. Are you writing this season off, or does it even matter if they make it a charge to get into that play-in?
Mike, a couple of weeks ago, I was of the opinion that, hey, Joel Embiid is 30, 31 years old, and if you have Joel Embiid at that age, you can't write seasons off just because of his age. You've got to try to get the big three healthy, and then you've got to hope that maybe they can make some sort of playoff run if they make the playoffs at all. But, Mike, I've changed my opinion. You have Joel Embiid saying now that he might need surgery in the offseason to repair his knee. You have Paul George playing with a torn tendon in his finger. Even when the big three has been out there, they have not played well. To me, I think the 76ers would be very, very smart to shut it down, shut Embiid down, shut Paul George down, try to get Embiid healthy, let Paul George heal, and then live to fight another day next season. I don't see any way they get any benefit from running these guys out there injured. If Embiid's going to need another surgery, let's get that surgery. Let's get that knee straightened out. Let's get it recovered. Let's give Paul George a chance to get healthy because he hasn't even looked, finger aside, he's looked terrible out there. He's looked slow, lethargic in the games. I think they got to shut it down. It's a lost season. Try to protect their draft pick, which I believe they get if it's 6 or higher. And, shut it down this season. I don't see the point going forward at this rate.
Mike, I'm getting to the point where I do agree with your first point is if Embiid's playing and they're out there, it's hard to throw away a season. However, this has to be, and I'm counting the process seasons where you knew you were going to lose. This has to be the most disappointing Sixers season in 25 years.
Yeah, absolutely. And because it came from such a surprise, because I don't think any of us had any idea back in training camp that Embiid would be so limited. I mean, the injury to Paul George happens, okay, but Embiid's inability to get on the court, and it just seems to have snowballed throughout the season, has been a real downer for the Sixers and their fans. And I just think, Mike, this is going back to January of last year. This is almost 13 months now where he has been unable to consistently play basketball. And even if you make the playoffs, we both know there's no way he can play or survive a 2-month playoff grind of playing every other day after the second round. There's no way he can survive that. So shut him down, get him healthy, and try to make the most of the situation next year. Because to me, and I can't believe not more is made about this, to me, there's serious questions about Embiid going forward career-wise. He hasn't played basketball on a consistent basis in 13 months.
It's been a bizarre season, and you're right. I mean, I said, how apropos, Mike, is it that George comes here, and there were questions about him, but it's not like he hurt his knee. He didn't hurt, something. He hurt his pinky. And you're like, how apropos is it that this organization signs a guy to a max deal, and what's keeping him from playing to the level that we expected is a pinky?
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like something small, but I mean, I guess it is a bad tendon tear in that pinky, and he is, I guess, from what I understand, taking shots to get out there to deal with the pain and try to play. I mean, Paul George is a guy who played 74 games last season, played at a high level for the Clippers. There's a reason why the Clippers didn't want to give him a fourth year of the contract deal, and I think you're seeing it this year. Even when healthy, he has not looked good. He has looked slow. He has looked lethargic. So let's I would shut him down, allow him time to heal, and see if he can get back to the level he was at last year, because he looks like he's taken a big step backwards. And sometimes that happens with older players. You used to say in boxing, you walk up those ring steps, a young man, and you walk down an old man. And it seemed to me like Paul George has aged, 10 years basketball-wise overnight.
Mike McGarry, at AC Press McGarry on the X platform, and, of course, right here on the Sports Bash Live on 97.3 ESPN, pressofAtlanticCity.com, as we transition to the winter, spring, no more football, the Phillies, the Sixers. We'll see what else is happening, but obviously the Eagles winning Super Bowl 59 has people still riding high. Mike McGarry, appreciate it as always, pal.
Good to talk to you, Mike. We'll see you down the road.
Yeah, and of course, we got the March Madness. That will be coming up next. As he said, one of the things that he's getting into is the National College Basketball. Yesterday, if you put on the guide to watch something, every channel seemingly had a college basketball game on. Every single one, there was a college basketball game on. Now they're talking about expanding the field. More Sports Bash on the way. I'm Mike Gill. Coming up in the 3 o'clock hour, we'll talk some Phillies spring training with Bob Wankel at about 3:30 today, right here on the Sports Bash Live on 97.3 ESPN. And we will talk some football on the way, of course, throughout the show. What's next for the Eagles? Another Eagles assistant up for a job in New Orleans. I got the details on that coming up next on the Sports Bash on 97.3 ESPN. All right, 252 is the answer to the lack of interest in NBA All-Star Weekend to check out what the NHL is doing. Now, there's a game on right now. Now, you know I'm a big proponent of live afternoon sports. Canada is beating Finland 4-0, so they're going to go ahead and play USA tomorrow night. Now, did you watch all the hockey this weekend?
It's Thursday night, actually, would be the game.
USA Canada, 4.4 million viewers. It peaked at 5.2. Most watched non-Stanley Cup final game since 2019. Here's the thing. All-Star Weekend for the NBA is a huge deal to the television networks. The ratings are usually pretty good. It is also a chance for them to kind of wine and dine all the suits. So NBA All-Star Weekend is a huge weekend in the NBA where all the owners come together, all the big advertisers, they get a chance to shake hands, kiss babies, all that jazz.
Right.
So for them to pivot, to stop their season, to do something similar to what the NHL is doing, I don't know that that would be conducive to the TV partners. Maybe. I mean, you might get a lot of viewers because I contend what could happen down the road is you have the NBA, you have NBA Europe, you have NBA Africa, and NBA maybe Australia. The champions of each NBA play against each other with 4 teams and see who's the best team in the world, which is the best league in the world. Now, everybody would immediately say the NBA here would win, but would they?
There's no guarantee.
If the European players didn't come here to play in the NBA, they played in NBA Europe, you might be in some trouble.
I think that's why some of the conversation about the U.S. versus the world is a bit of a question mark, because do you really believe the U.S. could beat the world team?
Last night they did. Wasn't that the world team? Kenny or Charles' team? Didn't he have the world team?
They called it the world team. That was more like a tongue-in-cheek making fun of Chuck. They drafted a bunch of white guys.
All right, well, coming up on the other side, we'll get into some more football. What's next for the Eagles? And a Eagles assistant coach, the 4th assistant, has interviewed for a job with the Saints. How could that affect next season? It's all coming up next on the Sports Bash. 3 o'clock, Sports Bash this hour brought to you by Broadlee's Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning, your trusted source for heating, plumbing service, and installation for generations. 609-390-3907, online, broadlees.net. John McMullen from Birds 365 and Sports Illustrated set to join us to talk about what's next for the Birds as they get ready for an important offseason. I say important, you win the Super Bowl. What's next? How do you top it? Well, you try to become historic by winning 2. That's the task at hand. This is a very young roster, but they have a lot of questions. And, Johnny Mac, a lot of people are already starting to sniff around the coaching staff, so we'll start there. 4 names are rumored to or have already interviewed with the Saints. Singleton, another one. Petula's been rumored. We've also seen on the defensive side Christian Parker, and quarterbacks coach Nussmeier is also there. So you're already starting to see the potential that they could lose some assistant coaches, and I want to get your thoughts. And that generally is what happens. Teams come after you, but they did not do very well the last time teams came after their assistants.
They did not. I think they were better prepared this time. It was ironic, though. It was really just the defensive coordinator last time, which they were kind of at least taken a little bit by surprise and the timing and everything. But offensively, they were prepared to lose Shane Steichen. They knew they were going to lose Shane Steichen. And, people will argue they didn't really do that successfully, but I don't know if that's the case. Like I said, offensively, they were number 8 in the NFL in 2023. They were number 8 in the NFL in 2024. They did it a little bit differently. They were more balanced in 2023, whereas 2024 was more Saquon heavy. But, if you go back to that season and say, well, if you gave them the number 1 defense, where would they have ended? It's an interesting question. I don't think Brian Johnson would be in Washington if they had the number 1 defense. I don't know if they would have won the Super Bowl, but they probably would have been darn close. I will say that. Yeah. So I don't even know if they handled it that poorly. It's just, but from the defensive side, obviously if they knew a little bit sooner, if Arizona, so many things, if Arizona would have hired Monty Ossenfort earlier, they would have went after Jonathan Gannon earlier, and the Eagles would have been prepared, would have been able to hire Vic Fangio. Who knows what would have happened?
Yeah, I mean, I want to get your thoughts. Obviously Singleton, he's the running back coach. Petula is the pass game coordinator. They're both assistant head coaches. You've also got Nussmeier, the quarterback coach there. It's likely one of those 3 guys is going to be gone, though, right? Yeah.
The worst case scenario is you lose 2, and that would be an offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator, Nick can block anybody else. And the presumption is that Doug Nussmeier will eventually be the guy. He and Kellen have been together since Kellen became a coach. So through Dallas, the Chargers, Philadelphia, and probably now New Orleans. So that would be my prediction there. Defensively, the thought around the league is he's going to hire Brandon Staley, who's his former boss and with the Chargers. And if he does that, the Eagles will be okay on the defensive side of the ball, because he can't take guys just to take them. They have to be promotions. Used to be back in the day, you couldn't even, they considered a move from, say, quarterbacks coach to offensive coordinator a lateral move, but they changed that rule a couple of years ago. So now you can't block guys from coordinator jobs. So that's the worst case scenario, is you lose Doug Nussmeier and, say, Christian Parker, but no more than that.
You're right. Christian Parker, by the way, is the defensive backs coach, and I guess I would ask the question with Fangio here. It assumes that every young coach is going to look to get out of here, because there seems to be no path to becoming a coordinator here. And, Vic gets a lot of credit, but how much do those lesser-known coaches play a role in the success of this defense? A guy like Christian Parker with that young secondary.
Well, they play a role. Christian, that's why he's getting, an interview because of how Quinyon Mitchell performed early in his career, how Cooper DeJean performed, the continued improvement of Reed Blankenship, the bounce back of C.J. Gardner-Johnson, all of that factored into it. But, I mean, you're not getting rid of Vic Fangio. So,
no.
Yeah, guys have it's a nomadic profession, I always say, especially younger coaches. Christian's 33. They have ambition. It's part of the process. If they're going to get a coordinator job, they're going to leave. But, we've seen so many Vic Fangio students. We've seen so many Vic Fangio copycats. I'd rather have Vic Fangio.
Yeah, there's no question about it. And just on Fangio, is he pretty much settled in here as this is his final destination, and how long, he doesn't want to be a head coach anymore, you would think?
Yeah, he said that pretty consistently. This is hopefully his last stop, is how he described it. He considers it his home. His family lives around the area. His aging mother lives close enough to where he can get to her when he needs to get to her. So, he doesn't at this stage does not want to be a head coach again. He wants this to be his last stop. Now, it's interesting if the Eagles didn't perform up to expectations, what would have happened? You think about people early this season, forget about off season, but early this season talk about Nick Sirianni getting fired. Well, if Nick would have gotten fired, they didn't perform. Who knows? The new coach may have not kept on Vic Fangio, but his goal is for this to be his last coaching stop.
John McMullen's with us here, by the way. Eagles assistant head coach and running back coach Jamil Singleton. He interviewed for the Saints offensive coordinator job. Doug Nussmeier is said to have interviewed, not Patullo yet, right?
No, not Patullo yet. I think there's a clear indication that that's going to be the way the Eagles go. So, if he actually gets an interview, that might be an indication that the Eagles are open to going in a different direction. But I think it's pretty clear that Kevin's going to get promoted here, and that would be able to prevent the Eagles from, have him interviewing other places.
Well, it's funny because we had earlier the first hour, the Eagles turned the page. Phillies are out there. Sixers, disappointing season. Fans are most interested in who's the coordinator going to be, what coaches are going to be gone, and then, of course, the free agencies here. So, John, let's kind of chip away at that a little bit here. Initial thoughts on, let's start with Josh Sweat. Is he a guy that I want to say is good as gone, but would he be the most likely of that big four that would not return?
I think either he or Milton Williams, just because they're both going to get so much money. And I think the Eagles are going to, they want to bring everybody back, but they're going to have walk-away numbers, so to speak. And generally, not only when you play well on a Super Bowl champion, but you play well in the actual Super Bowl, those guys get overpaid. And I think that's going to be the case with both Josh Sweat and Milton Williams.
So Milton Williams, Milton Williams hits the jackpot, right? Because of his age. He's at a point where he can really cash in because he's not like a 30-year-old free agent. He's in the 26-year-old range. So somebody looks at him as a long-term young player to help their defense.
Yeah, that's exactly what you want free agency coming off your first deal. He's 25 years old. And not only that, his first couple of years in the league, he was a rotational player because Fletcher Cox was still here. So there's not a ton of wear and tear yet as well. So even in other words, if you were a rookie that played a lot all 4 years, you're still going to be in line for a big contract. But, he hasn't even had much tread off the tire. He's just, Yeah, I mean, he bet on himself and he hit a grand slam. He didn't hit a home run. He hit a grand slam. He's
Yeah.
going to make well upwards over $20 million.
So
a year.
are those guys that have priced themselves out of returning, or how we could figure it out if they really want to?
Well, you can pay anybody you really want to. I mean, that's the thing, especially the Eagles, because the Eagles have embraced this thought process of cash over cap in the short term, and by that I mean void years on the back end, so they can spread it out and kick the credit card down the line, so to speak. So, I mean, they've been the leaders in that, and yeah, if they want to keep them, they can keep them. But Howie's already talked to us before he went down to New Orleans, said this is going to be a different offseason, don't have as many assets. I do think they're going to be a little bit more disciplined. And you have to make some difficult decisions. Is Milton Williams a $23 million a year player? I don't know. He's very good. But remember what's coming down the road. You got to pay Jordan Davis. You got to pay Jalen Carter. Can't pay everybody.
No, you can't. And that obviously, before we get to some of the other guys, would bring you to, well, how do you replace them, John? And you always laugh, no, anytime there's a big name that gets released. But what about a big name that wants to be traded?
Can I tell you I got a Raheem Mostert already? I got Raheem Mostert is 33. He's going to be 33 years old. But people know the name.
He was here, too.
Yeah, he started here. But, no, they're not going to bring a 33-year-old running back to complement Saquon Barkley. But I digress.
All right.
Yeah, usually it's #no.
All right, so #no on guys who get cut who are older. But what about guys who want to be traded? Does Myles Garrett's name even on the Eagles' radar?
Well, yeah, not that they're unique, but they love the player. Who doesn't? He might be the best football player in the world. Jordan Mailata has tremendous respect for him. Lane Johnson, Nick Sirianni, Howie Roseman. When you're this might be the best football player in the world, regardless of position. So you're always, and Howie's famous for calling about everybody, and he'll certainly make calls about that. He's very close to Andrew Berry. He's very close to Catherine Hickman, so he's very close to the Browns front office in general. Now, the Browns don't want to trade Myles Garrett, but sometimes it gets to the point where, he's just sick of the organization, sick of the losing. And if he forces it, then, yeah, Howie would get involved. The problem for the Eagles is, what it would cost, not only the money it would cost to bring him in, but also the assets. This is a player that will cost multiple draft picks, probably we were talking about this on my show this morning, probably players as well. And, it's the old fan, well, trade him Bryce Huff. They don't want Bryce Huff.
Yeah.
You know who they want? Nolan Smith.
That's the I'd like to further the conversation with you too, because we looked at this a little on Friday. Bill Barnwell wrote a piece. He put Philadelphia in a category of like, hey, this is a guy who could put you over the top, and what it would take.
They're already over the top.
Right. Well, he said they're already over the top, but this would put you in a position to repeat. And his thing was, look, you have pick 32. That's not even really attractive enough, so you would have to add more picks. But the Eagles don't really have a player that makes sense to move. That's the thing. I'm looking up and down the roster thinking, unless you want to trade a young, somebody young, like you mentioned, Nolan Smith. Jalen Hunt. I don't even think Jalen Hunt has enough, isn't attractive enough. The one guy I said, all right, maybe if they said, hey, we'll take Tanner McKee, I don't even think he has enough. There's just not enough, I think, without just bombarding them with draft picks.
Yeah. No offense, but people are ridiculous if they think Tanner McKee's getting Myles Garrett, or they think Bryce Huff is getting Myles Garrett along with a first-round pick. I mean, you have to give up something. something of value. And if the Cleveland Browns are losing the best pass rusher on the planet, they probably want a pass rusher. That's why I bring up Nolan Smith. Now, if they trade Myles Garrett, they might end up drafting. They're very high in the draft, obviously. They might end up drafting Carter, and who knows? They might want to go in a different direction. But you would think they want to replace somewhat replicates, even though you can't. And, the one player on the Eagles that I think would be of significant interest is Nolan Smith. And I got so many players, we can't give up Nolan Smith. Well, then forget about Myles Garrett.
There you go. You don't want to give up a guy like Nolan Smith? You can't get Myles Garrett. I will say this. In the Barnwell piece, he had a list of trades that were – did you read the piece? Or
I did not.
Okay, so he had a list of – Richard Seymour was 30 when he got traded from New England to the Raiders, and all they sent was a first-round pick. I don't feel that they got enough there. And I don't think the Browns would take one first-round pick at number 32. That seems far-fetched for me.
Yeah, I don't think that's realistic. I think teams have gotten smarter over the years. I think, Miles is 29, so I get the age competition. Richard Seymour's a phenomenal player. Don't get me wrong, Hall of Fame player, but he's not Myles Garrett. This is a different animal, different beast.
Yeah.
I've heard people talk about 2 number ones as the starting point, plus either more draft picks and more players. That I think is more realistic of what he would generate. Certainly, remember who taught Andrew Berry how to do his job. They're not taking one first round pick from Myles Garrett.
John McMullen, Birds 365. So there's the Garrett stuff for you guys out there. Zach Baun, let's go to him. He's an interesting one. I mean, obviously he wants to be here and all that stuff. The Eagles want him. And I'm very intrigued to see what the league thinks of him. Do they look at him and say, well, he did that only because he was in Philly. I don't think we get the same production out of him. Or did he unlock other teams to say, got to have that guy? I'm interested to get your take on what Baun's market will be.
Yeah, I'm interested as well. I don't, if you look at Roquan Smith as tops, and then Fred Warner's right behind him, 19.8 or 7.5 or somewhere around that range. So very close, but I don't think he's going to get that. So then it becomes, where is he going to land on the spectrum? I think Tremaine Edwards is third. He certainly should get more than Tremaine Edmonds. But, yeah, it is going to be interesting because he has only done it for a year. He's still young. He didn't play much, similar to what I said, but with Milton, but only to a greater degree. So there should be plenty of left on the odometer, so to speak. He made plays in every game. I mean, he was so consistent. From week 1 in Brazil to the Super Bowl, just play after play after play. I don't know how anybody in this league can look at that guy and say, oh, maybe it's just because of the Eagles, or maybe it's just because of Vic Fangio. I mean, he's just athletic. He's instinctive. He's got a high football IQ. He's got a knack for playing the football in coverage. He's got a knack for stripping it with the peanut punch. I don't know why anybody wouldn't like him.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of dumb teams in this league. I think the Eagles got half of the league beat before they even start because they outthink themselves in these types of situations. I mean, it's one of the best 5 defensive players in football this season.
Wow, unbelievable. All right, John McMullen, Birds 365. We'll take a look further at offensive free agency throughout the week here, getting ready for the offseason. You got not training camp. We've got the draft process to get into as well, and we'll be taking a look at the Eagles offseason here with John McMullen. Birds 365, weekday mornings, 8 a.m. on the Jacob Media YouTube channel. All right, Johnny Mac, we'll talk to you, pal.
All right, thanks, Mike.
All right, there you go. So you get some thoughts on what could happen with Myles Garrett, what it might take. He says maybe a Nolan Smith. You willing to give up a Nolan Smith to get a guy like Myles Garrett? Is that worth it to you guys? Sports Bash Live, 97.3 ESPN. This hour brought to you by Broadleaf's Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning, your trusted source for heating, plumbing, service, and installation. Generations. Call them 609-390-3907. Online, broadleafs.net. Tomorrow, we'll talk about the offensive free agents that are available to leave the team and what the Eagles might be doing with some of the other free agents. Guys like Kenny Gainwell is a free agent. So we'll talk to John about that on tomorrow's show. Coming up next, what's up with the Phillies? A new lineup? The top questions from Clearwater. Bob Wankel's back for another season of Phillies talk. That's next. This is the Sports Bash on 97.3 ESPN. 327 Sports Bass Live, 97.3 ESPN. Mike Gill with you till 6. A lot of people chiming in on the text board, 609-403-0973. Are you apathetic about the start of Philly season? A little hungover from the Eagles Super Bowl. Are you at that point where you're like, Phillies, I'll believe it when I see it? Have they hit you there yet? Bob Wankel, Crossing Broad, is back as the Phillies are at spring training. And he joins us now on the Sports Bass Live on 97.3 ESPN. See what the Eagles winning a Super Bowl does? It makes you not care about anybody else. You're just so euphoric about winning that you don't care if anybody else win, lose, or draws anymore, Bob Wankel.
Yeah, man, you blink and all of a sudden you're like, wow, the Phillies are playing games this weekend. You know, they start up this Saturday. It kind of just comes at you fast when you're so preoccupied with something else. And listen, not your fault. I totally get it. But I would have bet anything that would be what we would talk about at the start here. Is it like wake me up in October with this Phillies team this year? And I'm getting that sense, whether it be on X or, looking at how people are kind of just in conversations I've had with people that follow the Phillies. Everyone seems a little bit exhausted going into this.
Well, I think even if the Eagles don't win the Super Bowl, are you looking at a team that says, seen this team, I already know the outcome? Didn't do enough for me this offseason. Is that the vibe, or is it more a vibe of the Eagles won and I'm not ready for baseball yet? Which one?
Might be a little bit of both, but I definitely get the sense that there's a little bit of Phillies fatigue here. You're largely running it back with the same group of players. They've taken a step back each of the last 2 years now from when they were knocking on the door, winning the World Series. And it's an inconsistent team. It's a team whose bats have gone cold in the last couple postseasons. And so I understand that there's a lot of doubt about this team. And I understand that there's just not a lot of, in years past, it's, hey, they have this big free agent guy coming in. We feel good about the additions. And this year it's like, okay, Jesus Luzardo is a nice rotational piece. I don't know if their bullpen's any better. And like Max Kepler could be a nice player, but is that getting anybody fired up? And look, I totally get the skepticism and just maybe the lack of enthusiasm, at least on the onset of this season here.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, I ask you, Bob, you get Jesus Luzardo, good pitcher, could be a top of the rotation guy places. But did you watch the playoffs and surmise our fifth starter's our biggest problem? You might have surmised that over 162 that your fifth starter's a problem, but did you lose the Mets series because you didn't have enough starting pitching?
No, you certainly did not. I mean, the starting pitching for the most part held up in that series, but I would just say this. I mean, look, there's two different ways to look at it. Just because the starting pitching didn't fail you in that Mets series doesn't necessarily mean that it couldn't this season. I mean, like anytime you have an opportunity to make yourself better, you go out and do that. And I think that the Phillies were not going to be able to overhaul their lineup in a way that they were going to have an elite lineup. So to me, it's like, where can you make yourself elite? Where can you really say, we have an opportunity to add on to a strength, to bolt on to something, even if it's something we're already good at. And this Luzardo trade could pay off in a way that you could say, if everybody holds up and Andrew Painter's added to the mix come July, give or take a month, could be June, could be August. If he comes in and is what we think he might be, all of a sudden you might be so elite in one area that you do set yourself up to compete. So I'm cool with the fact that they went out and continued to add to that rotation. You can never have too many arms. I certainly think it's the strength of this team. And I think it is what will make them one of a maybe even less than handful of competitors that could legitimately challenge the Dodgers in the National League.
All right, let me ask you this question. Atlanta's better, New York's better, Philadelphia about the same, maybe a little worse. I don't know. Is their bullpen better today than it was? I know their bullpen failed them, but over 162, it was a huge strength that allowed them to pull away from the pack. Are they better in the bullpen?
I think there's a little bit of uncertainty about it. I certainly do. Jeff Hoffman was a guy that I liked. I liked him on a personal level. I thought he did a really nice job over 2 years for the Phillies, and certainly things didn't go well for him against the Mets in the postseason, and he did start to leak oil a little bit down the stretch in the regular season as well. But when you talk about the contract that he was able to secure, I understand why the Phillies didn't really want to swim in those waters. But what it looks like for this bullpen? No, I think it would be. I think that there's a world where they can be as productive, but I don't think going in you can say, oh, they've certainly upgraded their bullpen or it's stronger on paper than it was a year ago. I don't feel that way. As far as the lineup goes, it is largely the same. Could they get better performances, more consistent performances from certain players? Possibly. I think that actually starts with Bryce Harper. Bryce Harper had a good year a season ago, hit 285, 30 homers. OPS was, just short of 900. But can Bryce Harper do more? I think so. So, I mean, is there a little bit more of a ceiling in that lineup that they can maybe tap into? Possibly. Here's what I would say, though. This is not a bad team. And this is a team that probably will compete in the National League East. They have the second best odds to win the division, even ahead of the Mets still. I don't know what sports books we're allowed to talk about on this show, but one prominent sports book has their total set at 91.5 wins. They have the third best odds to win the National League, the fourth best odds to win the World Series. We unfortunately have sort of graduated to this way with the Phillies that we kind of consume the Sixers, which is talk to me in the playoffs. That doesn't mean this isn't a good team, though, that's not going to win a lot of games.
No. Well, I would ask the question, Atlanta's better, the Mets are better. Is it even a guarantee that all three teams make the playoffs?
No, I mean, look, anytime that you have that much depth in a division, they can all beat each other up, and you never know. I would probably bank on those three teams making the playoffs. I think that there's enough commitment to winning. I think one of the things you have to really look at is how many ownership groups are committed to winning. How many teams are coming into spring training across Major League Baseball, really saying, hey, we believe in this club. We think we can make a playoff run this season. And the answer is probably less than 25 right off the bat. So what does that look like when you get midway through the season, even with the expanded wild card format? So I would still think that all three teams make it, but you don't necessarily know that.
Bob Wankel, Crossing Broad, Phillies getting ready for Detroit this Saturday. They'll start the Grapefruit League portion. Yes, indeed. Will this be the year we see the Phillies shake their lineup up, Bob Wankel?
Yes, you can rejoice. I think that, over 162 games, Kyle Schwarber in the leadoff spot, it works. I think it's been a net positive for them, at least in terms of the production that they get out of that spot. But one thing that became abundantly clear, very apparent at the end of last year was that the protection for Bryce Harper just was not really there. And so I think that they need to finally look ahead and say, maybe it's not about the full 162, but when we play elite competition late in the season, are we really optimally configured in terms of our lineup? And I think that we've seen enough evidence that they're not. So I think this is the year where you get Trey Turner in the leadoff. I think this is a year where you see Bryce Harper hit a lot in the 2 spot. Alec Boehm, I think, probably slots in at third to split up the lefties, and then you go Schwarber cleanup backed by Castellanos. I think that's what the top half of this lineup is going to look like at the start.
You and I are on the same 5 there, and then you have some configuration of either Stott or Kepler 6, and then JT 7. The guy who doesn't hit 6 probably hits 8th. And then you have a platoon in center field?
Yeah, I think right now, I think if you're facing a righty, you probably get Stott 6, Real Muto 7, and then have the 2 lefties and Marsh Kepler 8, 9. And then you have Turner back at the top, so you're not running into 3 straight lefties. Look, I think right now the idea is Marsh against righties. And Johan Rojas, they had a nice winter league, run. I guess they feel like there may be some improvement there. We'll see. They've even talked about Edmundo Sosa playing a little bit of outfield. We've been down that road before. It's never really materialized in bulk starts or bulk opportunities for him, but I think that that's something you keep an eye on too. It's not a perfect combination out there. They go out and they get Kepler, a guy who I know he thinks he's an everyday player, but his numbers against left-handers over 10 years has been mediocre at best, about a 650 OPS, hitting 220 against lefties throughout his career. So, there's a little bit of a deficiency there in terms of their balance overall.
That being the only offensive move, a little surprising. I mean, I would even have said I'd take another roll of the dice with Austin Hayes over what they ended up doing here. You brought another lefty into this lineup and then pronounced he's going to play every day. Was a little surprised by that. Andrew Painter, not until after All-Star, maybe even deeper. Does that mean they watch the lineup and then a Suarez or somebody else is a trade piece and they try to make their big move at the deadline?
It's possible. I think that there's a world where Ranger Suarez could potentially be a trade piece. Things have to play out a certain way. Health is the number one factor in that, but there could be a situation where they have a surplus of starting pitching. And, they went out and they signed Joe Ross. And I think that the idea for that, that pickup is that he starts the season in the bullpen, but he obviously has starting pitching experience as well. So if Painter slots in and they feel like, hey, look, we have a luxury here, that would be an intriguing piece. I kind of just feel like it's not trending in a way where they do a long-term deal with Ranger Suarez. It feels like the writing is sort of on the wall there. But again, I've said it the last couple of years. I've been a little bit surprised in terms of how things materialize once you get to the deadline. Kind of felt that the Phillies were in position going in where they would really add if the situation deemed it necessary at the deadline. And they've had pretty underwhelming trade deadlines. It's lacked that big move. And we'll see if this is the year that changes.
Well, because you got a lot of guys at the end of the line here. Real Muto, I guess he's going to try to play some outfield. Is that what we're hearing? You've got Schwarber, who might play some more outfield this year on the last year of his deal as well. Castellanos has 2 more years left on the deal. He's got a great agent, by the way, to get him that deal. So, yeah, they definitely – it feels like this is it for at least this core group of guys here. And that would bring me to my next question, Bob Wankel. Got the young kids, Miller. We talked a little bit about Painter and Crawford. Do either one of them play a factor in 2025?
I think, given the Phillies' outfield composition, that it's possible we see Crawford. I think that he's a guy though too that could be involved in trade discussions. I don't think that there is an untouchable beyond Painter, and so I think a lot of this is about performance. What does it look like once you get into the season? But yeah, I think it's possible you see Crawford. I'm less certain about Miller, quite honestly. He would presumably block as well. I mean,
he's playing shortstop today.
Yeah, a little shortstop today. I mean, if they ran into
Trey
a situation
Turner's not there, by the way. Turner's wife just had a baby.
He'll be here later this week. So, look, it is possible. But I wouldn't bank on that.
Yeah, I know he's at short. You got Turner there. That sets up one of those odd things where you're the shortstop and you're paid $300 million and you got this kid that everybody wants to see taking ground balls behind you. It feels like a weird dynamic about to happen later this week.
I actually think there's a lot of weird dynamics with this team. They ran it back, so to speak. And Nick Castellanos said that he talked to Dave Dombrowski, who said that the trade rumors were overblown. Alec Boehm is back here, obviously, as well. And just because both of those guys are back here doesn't mean that there wasn't at least a consideration or an exploration to try to move on from either of those players. I think probably what became pretty obvious very early on in the offseason, though, was that considering what the Phillies have invested into these players and that they still remain in a win-now mode, they probably felt like the return that they were going to get back on either guy wasn't going to make them better in 2025, nor was it really going to give them a lot of flexibility moving forward. So you just stand pat and say, let's just kick it into the season and see how things go. I think that maybe even the Phillies, when last postseason ended, last October, I think that they might have been a little bit surprised that all of these guys would be back together. But it's very obvious that they want to leave a little bit of flexibility going into 26 and beyond here. I think that they learned this organization last time. You don't want to get too nostalgic. You don't want to just lock up guys long-term because you like them and they've had some success here. So, they're going into this kind of like a little bit of a show-me situation.
Yeah. Talked about the bullpen. Who closes? Romano, Kerkering, somebody else?
Yeah, I think it's Romano, at least to start. He's the guy with experience, and I think that, that's where they've sort of gone the last couple of years. They tend to give the opportunity at the start of the season to the guy who is most seasoned, most conditioned to do it. And as much as they like, the Kerkerings and Stroms of the world, again, like these guys have not consistently recorded outs in the ninth inning, and so I think that that's where they start.
Still have Alvarado there as well. So you have Strom, you have Alvarado, and you do have Kirk Green, who's been there now going into his second full year. He feels like he's been here for a while because he was on that team 2 years ago, late in the year. But last year was really only his first full season in the Phillies bullpen. That all is taking shape right now in Clearwater. The last thing, I guess, and we don't know the answer to this, but it could come up, did they just get old real fast? And does this team all of a sudden look old right before our very eyes? Because, we saw that happen. You mentioned like they've held on to guys in the past. They win the World Series in '08. They progressively lost one round. That's what they've done here. They lost in the World Series. They've lost in the CS. They've lost in the DS. And then that team just all of a sudden crumbled. They had injuries that caused a lot of the crumble. But do we think this team the age might start to rear its ugly head in? And don't forget, they got a couple pitchers at the top of that rotation that are starting to age a little bit.
They do, and I think that's the key. Would I be surprised if this lineup continued to regress? No, I would not be. But I do think at the end of the day, when you have Aaron Nola, when you have Zach Wheeler, if those guys can stay healthy, this rotation should be good enough that the Phillies win a lot of games, even if there is regression offensively. I'm really up on Luzardo. I think that Caleb Cotham's an outstanding pitching coach. We've seen Luzardo have success. I would not be surprised if he gets back on track this season. But, yeah, can Zach Wheeler continue to be super durable? Can Aaron Nola continue to be super durable? And I think that's the biggest question coming into this entire thing. I will just say this. A lot of people talk about how bad or how mediocre the Phillies were after a hot start last year. It was all April. It was all May. And that's true to an extent. But I will say this. From June 1st on, they were 55-49. Not great. And it really turned about 10 days into June once they came back from London. But I will say this. From June 1st on, Taijuan Walker made 13 starts for the Phillies last year. The Phillies were 2-11 in those games. So in games that weren't started by Taijuan Walker after June 1st, the Phillies were still 53-38. They weren't world beaters. They didn't play at the pace where they were going to win 115 games like they did for 2 months. But I do think that we're exaggerating a little bit how, whatever word you want to use, how bad the Phillies were, how they're not going to do anything this year. I totally understand the fatigue, but I would just say you might be pleasantly surprised once things get rolling here a little bit.
Do you think we'll leave on this, Bob Wankel, Crossing Broad, Philly season underway Saturday for the Grapefruit League? You think they're going to start to see it at the stadium, or is it still full house every night?
Oh, maybe that first series will look good, at least that first game, but I think the attendance is going to be down a little bit until the weather breaks and school's out. And yeah, if you just said year to year, like year over year, is it going to be down those first 6 weeks at home? I think so.
I mean, they have sold out. I was actually surprised. They have filled that place up pretty much from 2022's playoffs on. The Sixers have filled that building, and this is the first year they're starting to feel it a little bit. I don't think they're filling that place on a nightly basis. So are the Phillies also going to see the gate kind of take a step back?
Let me give you one other variable here.
All right.
Look, your listeners right now, probably a lot of Eagles fans out there. How much money did you spend on Eagles merchandise after the Super Bowl? Like, we all have a limit in what we can spend recreationally here. Like, I'll tell you, for myself, I went over to the sporting goods store and bought a hoodie and a hat and got my father-in-law a hat. And I looked at the bill and I said, oh, that's $400. So you start spending all that money and going Eagles crazy. That money's got to, at some point.
We were in New Orleans, and everybody pulled out over $200 when we went to the store, and that was for one item.
Yeah.
So
look, funds, there's a limit to the funds. There's a limit to the recreational spending, so we'll see.
All right, Bob, you going down to Clearwater this year at all?
That's actually up in the air right now. That's something we can take off air and discuss, but yeah, we'll see.
All right, I got dates for you. Text me.
All right, man.
All right, buddy. Bob Wankel, everybody, is back for another season of Phillies baseball here on the Sports Bash live on 97.3 ESPN, the 97.3 ESPN free mobile app, live video streaming on the X platform and on YouTube at Mike Gill Show. If you were watching on the YouTube channel, you saw Bob ready for another baseball season. And this hour of the Sports Bash is brought to you by Broadleaf's Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning, your trusted source for heating, plumbing service, and installation. When we come back, Rob Thompson answers the question about texting Nick Sirianni. What happened there? I want the insight. I want to hear it from Topper next on the Sports Bash on 97.3 ESPN. All right, 3:53. So what did Rob Thompson text to Eagles head coach Nick Sirianni? Here's Topper down in Clearwater earlier. Was this today? Did they talk to people about this?
This was over the weekend.
All right. So Topper texts Sirianni. Here you go.
Did you maybe reach out to your counterpart with the Eagles?
I did. I texted him, and he didn't text me back, but I said in the text, I know you're getting 300, 400 texts, so don't worry about it. But I just wanted to congratulate him and the entire club. I mean, it just, the city's on fire right now, and rightly so. They played great. That was a dominant performance.
Bad job, Nick.
So what is the timeline that Sirianni should have gotten back to Robbie Thompson?
Immediately. He's the manager of the baseball team in your town. You can't just stiff the guy.
I mean, it's been a week since Rob still hasn't heard back.
Yeah, it's incomprehensible that Sirianni has not texted Thompson back. A thank you, go win it, keep it going, this is your year, something. Like, people.
So you're throwing the flag on Sirianni.
Well, who else would I throw it on? I mean, Topper reached out, congratulated him. That's what you do. It's like all the sports teams in Philly, they all say congratulations to the Eagles for making the Super Bowl, except for one. Bad job by them. This team gets a congratulatory from one of those teams. That's where the coach has to say, thanks, Topper. Now it's your turn. How long is too long? The text reply has to be immediate. I don't know how. Listen, I'm a pretty quick getter backer. If I don't get back to you almost like immediately, it means I probably either didn't see it at that moment, I'm on the air, people text me while I'm on the air, or something. I'm pretty quick at getting back. I can't imagine Sirianni looked at that text and said, nah.
So you're saying Sirianni might not even seen it?
Well, I mean, how do you not, like, hey, Coach Sirianni, this is Rob Thompson. Want to congratulate you on winning the Super Bowl. Great job, my friend. I know you got a lot of text. Don't get back to me, whatever. A thumbs up?
So what grade do you give Thompson on his graciousness then?
Great job by him. It's exactly what you need to do. You got to reach out, congratulate the guy across the street, and then Sirianni, bad job. This has to come right back to Sirianni to say, Coach, now it's your chance. Thanks. Doesn't have to be long. Not a lot of time out of your day. I know Sirianni's been bar hopping and partying, but even at the bar, he can respond. Bad job, Nick Sirianni. Bad job. All right, football at 4. It's coming up next here on the Sports Bash. Football at 4 is powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. It's brought to you by Bet365. Whatever the sport, whatever the moment, it's never ordinary. At Bet365, Jeff Mosher from the Inside the Birds podcast will join us today for another edition of Football at 4. And, of course, the Eagles win. You just heard Jeffrey Lurie about the another Lombardi. Our culture begs for it. Well, he was right. They have begged for it. They are a Super Bowl champion for the second time in club history. And how do they get to that third one? We'll talk to Jeff Mosher about that, the contracts, how they line up for a lot of people talk about, can you repeat? I think the question with the Eagles isn't more about repeating back-to-back. It's more, can this team be the Chiefs? Can they be a Patriots? Are they lined up for multiple Super Bowl appearances and victories? Because back-to-back, that puts you on another level. But getting there 3 and 4 years, 4 and 6 years, something to that effect, do they have the roster makeup to do it? Well, you look at quarterback, very young. You look at left tackle, Jordan Mailata, young player. Landon Dickerson, young player. Cam Jurgens, young player. 3/5 of your offensive line are younger players that you should have into the mix for a long time. You look at running back, Saquon Barkley, you got 2 more years minimally of him still on this roster. A.J. Brown's a young player. I mean, he is not a 32-year-old wide receiver. Neither is Devontae Smith. So you have the core of your offense, for the most part, all here for the next 2, 3, possibly 4 more seasons. So you really have a chance with this offense, the way that Howie Roseman has put this offense together, you have a good chance to line up offensively for continuity. The one problem with the continuity is you keep changing coordinators, but at least you have the same personnel. And I think that's why Kevin Petula will likely be the new coordinator for the Philadelphia Eagles, because they want the continuity of the players to match up with the continuity of the terminology. Instead of bringing out somebody else in, outside voice, learning something new, changing the vocabulary. Hey, let's keep it simple, stupid. We got the talent. Let's bring in a guy who's been here. So I think you're going to see Kevin Petula take over that position. On the defensive side of the ball, Jalen Carter, young player. Jalix Hunt, young player. Nolan Smith, young player. Quinyon Mitchell, young player. Reed Blankenship, Cooper DeJean, even Chauncey Gardner-Johnson. I mean, he's still in his 20s. The only guy on the defensive side of the ball really that is a player that is at the end of the line is Darius Slay, and obviously Brandon Graham, who's probably, I don't want to say probably. I don't know whether he's going to move on or not. I don't really have an indication of that. I actually think Graham might come back now if Josh Sweat leaves. I think the Eagles try to maybe convince him to play at a lower number and just say, hey, could you come back for 1 more year at a pretty manageable price until we can kind of figure out how to get out of some cap situation here. So I do think we'll see Graham come back. But the one thing is defensively, other than linebacker, I don't know what to think about the linebacker spot. Your defense is set up at 2 of the 3 lines. Defensive line, you've got your key guys, Carter, Smith, Jalix Hunt. You got those guys. The secondary, 3 of the 4 guys you have locked up long-term, younger players under 30 years old. It's just the linebacker position that I really feel, and I'm going to get Mosher's take on this when he joins us for Football at 4 here in just a minute. I want to get Mosher's take on what he sees the future linebacking spot. What is the takeaways from this organization? I don't want to say, do they now value linebacker? But it's something that they've kind of said, But how important is Zach Bond to this offseason? And how important is Zach Bond to the long-term success of this Philadelphia Eagles defense? I think that is a big question that Howie Roseman is probably, Vic Fangio, let's throw him into the mix there too. Vic Fangio has to have Howie's ear, and he has to be saying, hey, man, that guy's pretty darn important. You listened to me when I told you to bring him in, and now you better listen to me and not let him go. You went down this road of letting a linebacker get out of here. TJ Edwards, he went to Chicago. How'd that work out for you? You ended up with a bunch of vagabonds and journeymen. You want to go down the road of Cunningham, Zach Cunningham? You want to go down the road of Nicholas Morrow? You want Miles Jack coming in here for a week before he says, thanks but no thanks, I'm retiring? I don't think so. I think Zach Bond might be at the top of the list of the most important decisions that this club has to make. And here's the reason. I just told you on offense, you are pretty lined up for the next 3 to 5 years, right? You're pretty lined up for like the next 3 to 5 years. The quarterback's here, the receivers are here, the running back's here for at least 2, the offensive line. And I think Lane Johnson will probably be here for at least 2 more seasons, right? I think Lane is here probably for at least 2 more seasons. So with the offensive line the way it is, you should not have a weak spot on that offensive line. I mean, that's one of the problems that so many of these teams have is their offensive line just isn't any good. They got good skill players. They just don't have the offensive line. So I definitely look at the Eagles offense and say, for the next 3 to 5 years, you should be pretty solid. On defense, you have the makings up front with Carter and the guys we mentioned, and then that secondary, you're so young. You can't – and this is where I think Bond has an advantage being a free agent when he is. Nobody else needs to get paid yet. You don't have to pay Mitchell. You don't have to pay Cooper DeJean. Chauncey Gardner-Johnson already got his payday, so you don't have to worry about him. So Howie Roseman should have in place, hey, I already know what the bill looks like for Chauncey Gardner-Johnson. I already know what those guys are getting paid. And I don't need to pay Quignon and Cooper until, probably another year down the road. So the one guy who I could put a little extra money into that maybe, see, here's the thing. At the beginning of the year, way back in August, way back in March, let's go to, when they signed Zach Bond, when they gave him $1.5 million to come here and play, I don't think they ever budgeted for, we might have to give this guy $9, $10, $11, $12 million. So if you look at what his price tag could be on the open market, I don't think the Eagles ever had that as something they thought they were going to have to pay. Well, guess what? Smart businesses, good businesses shift. We have something that we value. We now have to change our projections. And you take a look at Harry Douglas, he believes what I believe is that Zach Bond is probably the top priority to sign this offseason.
Zach Bond, the linebacker, the guy who made All-Pro. You talk about a guy that was great in coverage, but not only great in coverage, but second in the National Football League in run stop. So Zach Bond is a guy that was a hidden gem for them. Shout out to Howie Roseman. We know how great he's been from a general manager standpoint. So Zach Bond is a guy I feel like they must sign back.
I agree with Harry Douglas there. I've been thinking about this a lot. Which guy is the most important? Who's the top priority? I think Zach Bond's the guy. And I like Milton Williams maybe the best, but I think you can replace Mekhi Becton. I think you can replace Josh Sweat. I think you can find people to take Milton Williams snaps. But Zach Bond is the hardest guy to replace. Zach Bond is the hardest guy to replace for multiple reasons. One, there's not a lot of good linebacker play in this league. Two, the Eagles have been terrible at finding linebackers, and they don't want to invest draft capital in that spot. So what do? You most likely have to pay a lot of money up front to Zach Bond and then maybe get creative. Hey, man, you had a great year. We'll reward you for it with a big upfront payday, but maybe your salary's a little less. Now, I get it. Some other team might blow you out of the water. Some other team might say, guess what? We have a lot of money, and we want you. Is somebody willing to give him double digits, 10 million, 11 million, 12 million? TJ Edwards got what, like 8 million a couple of years ago from the Chicago Bears, and the Eagles said that's too rich for my blood. So is there a team out there that really looks at him and says, we'll do whatever it takes to get this guy? 609-403-0973. Dan Graziano, he weighed in on the key to success. He says it's finding the next Bond and Becton at a discount.
Bond and Becton, you mentioned, were guys they got cheap last year because they looked at them and said, well, they're not making it where they are. What would they be for us? So if they re-sign Mekhi Becton and Zach Bond, they're not going to get them as cheaply as they got them. So they got to find at other positions next year's Zach Bond and Mekhi Becton. That's how you sustain this success. You get contributions from guys that you don't have to pay big cap charges to.
I agree with the premise. Here's the problem. I don't need guys at other spots. I don't need to go out and sign, unless you're telling me I'm going to go out and sign another Zach Bond. Why would I do that? So I already have Zach Bond right here. He's basically saying, yeah, go out and find other guys. Look, I like Howie Roseman as much as the next guy, but I can't keep putting it on his shoulders to hit on every single free agent signing. I can't say, Howie Roseman, go out and hit on every free agent signing. So I might have to overpay to keep his decision-making down. Jeff Mosher from the Inside the Birds podcast, InsideTheBirds.com, the premise there of which guy is the top priority, Jeff Mosher. I'm going to go, I want to see what you think, but I'm going to go with Zach Bond as the guy who is the top priority for me to bring back this offseason. Do you have you identified your top priority of the Eagles free agents?
Well, I would say priority is not just related to talent, but ability to sign. So if you were to take the money out of the equation and say, how would you rank the top three Howie Roseman and organizationally? I think Milton Williams would be the top of that list because of the importance that they put on defensive linemen and the depth that they have there. I mean, you have Jalen Carter, that's great, but they won because of Carter and Milton Williams consistently pushing that pocket, and Milton's a tough guy to replace. Now, I'm not going to downplay the impact that Zach Bond had, but historically we know inside linebacker is a position the Eagles haven't valued as much as defensive line. So to me, when you talk about value, it would probably be Milton Williams, Zach Bond, Mekhi Becton. And you can almost put Becton number 2, again, because of what I talked about with the organizational philosophy. But when you start talking about the money that's involved and what's more realistic, Milton Williams is probably going to command a truckload of money on the free agent market. Mekhi Becton might get a pretty good deal for being an offensive lineman. Zach Bond's going to be an interesting one because, is he going to get Patrick Queen money? Are there going to be a lot of teams after 1 year that line up and say, yeah, we're going to pay this guy $18 million a year? I don't know. And I don't think the Eagles know yet either. I think that's all stuff that's got to be shaken out over the next 3 or 4 weeks, but it may wind up being that Bond comes back out of those 3 because of the value matching the need and the market not being as ripe as it might be for a defensive lineman or an offensive lineman.
Yeah, and I'll tell you why Bond for me, okay? Because I just was, before you jumped on, your offense is in place for the next 2 to 4 years, this core group of guys. I mean, you've got Brown, you've got Smith, you've got Hurts. Most of that offensive line is pretty much intact and young. The left side of your line from Juergens out, they're young guys. Barkley's here for 2 more years. You got Hurts. So your offensive side of the ball, they're in place. You've got Carter and Hunt and Smith. So you've got some guys up front. Your secondary, 3/4 of your secondary is locked up pretty much the next 3 to 5 years. You got nothing at linebacker. I mean, nothing. I mean, you can't count on Nakobe Dean. He's not going to be ready to start the season. So I don't know how you can't look at Bond and say, we've got to figure this out because we've paid everybody else. Now, you got to have to pay Mitchell and DeJean at some point. Jalen Carter is going to have to get – but you have no replacement at linebacker. How do you let this defense go down the road of what you did 2 years ago and have to go get Zach Cunningham and Nicholas Morrow. I just don't see how you can go down that road. The other guys, do I want to lose Milton Williams? No, but I got Morrow and Jomo that maybe could play more snaps, and that's a place they don't mind spending draft capital. They don't want to spend draft capital at linebacker, so I got a guy, I might as well get creative. Now, I'm not saying you can't get creative. Maybe you got to pay him a lot of money up front, and then his salary's lower, but that's the guy to me I think you got to figure out, because you don't mind drafting offensive line, you don't mind drafting defensive line, but you don't want to draft linebacker.
Yeah, and so there's a couple of things for that. One, I mean, they want all of these guys back. They're going to make offers, but obviously the market will dictate what they can and can't do. And as much as they would like Zach Bond back, you have to worry about – I kind of painted one side of the conversation, which is he only did it for 1 year. He did it within a specific scheme. Are a lot of teams really going to value him as a Patrick Queen type of linebacker when he really only did it for a year and he wasn't expected to do that? The other side of the argument is he was a defensive player of the year candidate. He was amazing, and teams who have money to spend may go out there and try to reset the market and feel very comfortable giving this guy Patrick Queen money plus one, because it's now a year later. And so the Eagles always have a walkaway number, Mike. So if somebody out there says, we'll give, I think Queen's at 13.5, Milano might be 14, something like that. If we pay this guy, more than that, if we're willing to go to a number that is like,
I'll give you the number. I'll give you the number from Spot Track. Okay. For Zach Bond, their market value for him is 2 years, $19.4 million. So he'd be making almost $10 million a year.
Yeah. 2 years, 19.4 total?
So his average salary would be $9,700,000. 2 years, $19.4 million. So about almost $10 million a year, 9.7.
Yeah, now see, I think that's doable. And I think the Eagles would probably be all right with that, especially because it's not like a 5 or a 6. They'll probably get all that guarantee money out in the first year or two. But again, you got guys like Roquan at 20, Warner at 19, Tremaine Edmonds at 18, and this guy is hitting free agency at a time where he's coming off such a great year. I believe the Spot Track market is taking into account all the qualifiers we just added, that he's not been an inside linebacker his whole life, that he's only done it for 1 year. But what you can't do is predict what GM or owner is going to sit out there and say, I don't care, I want to have this guy and I'm going to pay him a gajillion dollars, which we see all the time at different positions.
I just wonder how much, they went through this one time before with TJ Edwards and ended up having to go through a Nick Morrow, Zach Cunningham season. Do they say, you know what? And I guess, because they know I've already paid Chauncey Gardner-Johnson. The two young kids probably don't need a contract extension until the following, so I don't have a lot of guys around that I have to pay. So do I overpay for a guy this year because my defense is pretty much locked in?
Yeah, I mean, that's what they have to figure out. Remember, they do have Nakobe Dean coming back, all right? So maybe he won't be ready for the opener, which might put more emphasis on having to bring back Bond. But also, they really think highly of Jeremiah Trotter Jr. And if you told them that Bond is going to get such a high market value that they have to walk away from it, and Dean's not going to be ready, then they have the opportunity to play Trott Jr. and bring back Oren Burks at a much more reasonable number than whatever Bond's going to get, knowing that they've got Nakobe Dean. And yes, they don't love to draft linebackers high, but they could use a third or fourth on another one. They got Jeremiah Trotter in the 5th round, and they really like him. So their like for Jeremiah Trotter, combined with knowing Nakobe Dean will come back and him having a really strong year, could also factor into the equation of their walkaway number on Bond, and then the ability to put money elsewhere. Now, you're saying they don't have a lot of guys on defense that they have to reward just yet. You're right. And if they lose Milton Williams, that's one less guy they have to pay. But on the flip side of that, Reed Blankenship was probably due for an extension. And on the offensive side, Cam Jurgens is due for an extension. And this would be the time that you'd probably want to try to get Nakobe Dean locked up because he's coming off another injury. He is 3 years into his 4-year deal. This is typically when you like to give your guys long-term extensions. And the fact that he's coming off another injury might allow you to have a more team-friendly deal than had he been healthy the entire year. Because he had such a strong year, you were looking at the idea of paying Bond and giving Nakobe an extension that was going to be pretty market value. And now it seems like one or the other, and they may just decide Bond's too expensive. Let's take our chance with Nakobe. Let's continue to develop Trotter Jr. and know that we have Oren Burks on a much smaller salary that we can play.
Yeah, Burks, by the way, is a free agent. Yeah, Burks is a free agent, so you would have to work out a deal with him. And you wonder if there's a team out there that says, look what this guy did for them in the playoffs. We think we can get a guy at pretty cheap to come in here and guarantee that he's going to be our starter. Hey, we'll give you $5 million to come here and play linebacker. The Eagles ain't paying you $5 million.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's what the Burks deal would be. I forget what he made last year. I think it was 2 or 3. I think that there's an opportunity if they want him back to say, give you a little bit of a pay raise because we know we're going to be relying on you if we lose.
Burks made just over $1 million last year.
That was base. Didn't he get I thought he got a little more than that.
He may have gotten some incentive stuff, but his salary was 1.1. Yeah.
Gotcha.
1 year, 1.1, no signing bonus, and he is a free agent.
Yeah, I think in total. I think in total he made closer to 2.5 though.
Yeah, he got a $350,000 signing bonus with the Eagles, and so I mean he didn't make a lot of money. He got 1.5.
Yeah, give him a 2-year deal where he's making like 4 a year, and that's probably because he's probably going to have to play a lot this coming year if you lose Bond and Nakobe's not ready. So you can give him a 2-year deal, bump him up to 4, and that's still a ton of money saved compared to what you would have to pay for Zach Bond, and then it enables you to get Jeremiah Trotter Jr. in there more.
Of the 4, do you think there's one that has no shot of coming back?
No shot of the 4. The 4 are Milton Williams, Becton, Bond, and who's the 4th? Burks?
Yep.
No, Rodgers or
Josh Sweat.
Oh, Josh Sweat. Yeah, Josh Sweat.
Yeah.
No
All
shot. And I would say that I think it's extremely unlikely as we sit here today that Milton Williams will come back. Just because my personal belief is he'll get like the kind of money that the Eagles gave to Javon Hargrave to get him from the Steelers, or that the Niners gave to Hargrave to get him from the Eagles, when the Eagles just said, like, we can't do this. They had Milton and they were smart. They said, we'll let Javon Hargrave walk and we'll play Milton. And I think that's, like you said, Moro Ojomo. Plus I'm sure they're going to draft a defensive lineman in the first 2 rounds. If the money gets too big for Milton, I think they're going to say we're just going to have to draft and develop like we have at that position.
Football at 4, powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. Jeff Mosher in the house today. Is the Eagles offseason underway? By the way, real quick, 4 coaches up for jobs potentially with the Saints. You got Singleton, the running back coach. You got Nussmeier, the quarterback coach. You got Kevin Petula, who's been rumored, has not interviewed there. And Christian Parker, the secondary coach, up for the defensive coordinator job. So unlikely that Parker gets that job, but one of those 2 offensive coaches could be on the way out. So we'll see what happens with that. We'll keep our eye on that as Kellen Moore is still putting his staff together. And Jeff Mosher and the guys from Inside the Birds podcast will have more on that. We'll have more on it right here on Football at 4 on the Sports Bash. All right, Moshe, good to see you, man.
See you too. Thanks for having me. I'll talk to you on Wednesday.
Absolutely. He's back on Wednesday's show. And, of course, the Inside the Birds podcast is always available wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Mike Gill. This is the Sports Bash Live on 97.3 ESPN. Subscribe at Mike Gill Show on YouTube and on the X platform. You can watch the show. Easy to do. At Mike Gill Show. Check us out each and every day right here on 97.3 ESPN. Download the free mobile app powered by First Bank of Sea Isle City. Knicks, Nuggets on the way. But before we get there, I want to tell you about my friends over at Game Day Men's Health in Egg Harbor Township. 1 in 4 men in the U.S. over the age of 30 have low testosterone levels. And whether you're chasing peak performance, reigniting intimacy, or simply want to feel your best, Game Day Men's Health is defining a new era in men's health, delivering premium testosterone replacement therapy and removing the stigma around ED and supporting weight loss with medical treatments and vitamin therapy. Fast appointments, immediate results, and expert guidance. No shortcuts. Their EHT office provides privacy, comfort, flat screen TVs, and zero fluff. Get stronger, get healthier, get back in the game. With a free testosterone test and consultation, a complete medical evaluation, and a customized game plan. Have a on-site lab. You get your testosterone levels in just 15 minutes. Call Game Day Men's Health and EHT, 609-365-7088, or visit English Creek Avenue in EHT at GameDayMen'sHealth.com and tell them Mike Gill sent you for a special offer to get yourself back in the game. We're going to get back into the game with Knicks Nuggets next on the Sports Bash. 433 Sports Bash. Knicks Nuggets. They're brought to you by the Fanatics Sportsbook at Ocean Casino Resort in Atlantic City, home of the Ocean Casino Resort Studios. It's the Sports Bash on 97.3 ESPN. A Monday with no football to look back at. Boy, such is sports life now. No football. What's next in the sports world? Knicks Nuggets is next. That's who's next. And he joins us now for another edition of Knicks Nuggets here on the Sports Bash Live on 97.3 ESPN. All right, Nick, what's going on, man?
Man, it's like, what do you do now? Like, I don't know what to do after all that. It was just so boom, boom, boom. One thing after another. They win, the parade, the whole thing, and now it's over. I mean, what do you do?
Tag, you're it. Phillies, That's it. I mean, we talked earlier, though. It doesn't seem like the same Phillies buzz. Like the Phillies seem like the fans seem like not all that thrilled with the offseason, so they're in wait-and-see mode. This has to be the worst Sixers season in about 25 years, so I don't think anybody's all that excited about the Sixers-Celtics kicking it back off on Thursday night, and the Flyers are about as mediocre as you can get.
I know, it's sad. Like, it was such an incredible year by the Eagles. They stole everybody's thunder, and now it's just over. Now we got to talk about who they're going to re-sign, etc. But you're right. It is time for spring training, Mike, and the Phillies, it's their turn next. I mean, listen, the Flyers, Sixers are underway. I get it. Sixers have been a dumpster fire. Flyers, they're mediocre as usual. So there's that. Now you have the Phillies, and this is a team that's starting to enter Sixers territory from a couple of years ago. It's like, wait and see. What are they going to do now? They get bounced in the postseason again. And I want to start with nugget number one. I want to start with a hypothetical scenario for you, Mike. And I want to talk about Aiden Miller. And Dave Dombrowski had some interesting comments that regarding Aiden Miller, who is one of the top prospects in the Phillies organization. And, he's played shortstop, third base, and he's a guy that's going to be up here quicker than you think. And Dave Dombrowski alluded to that, Mike, and he thinks he can get up here very fast. Could it be this year? Maybe. It could be. Maybe you see him later in the season, but it seems like next year might be the year. So I'm going to have a hypothetical scenario. Let's say Aiden Miller, who has been touted as this generational prospect, Mike Schmidt type of level prospect, if he were so good that they had to bring him up this year, would you rather move off Bohm or Turner? Because he can play third base or shortstop. I think they would rather have him at shortstop. But if you had to and you could bring him up this year, Aiden Miller, would you rather move off Bohm or that Trey Turner contract right now this second?
Actually, I think I'd rather move off the Turner contract.
Ooh, okay.
Yeah, I am not a big fan of that contract. I said he's not a $300 million player. I mean, he's just not. He was the beneficiary of a offseason where there were 4 shortstops, all free agents at the same time, and they drove the price up on each other. Trey Turner, not a bad player. I'm not saying that. Nowhere near a $300 million player. So if you can get off that $300 million contract, that's the move you got to make. Alec Bohm, good player, not going to make anywhere near $300 million. Even if you say, hey, I have to re-sign him and bring him back, he's nowhere in the $300. He's probably not even in the $100 million range. So I'd much rather stick it out with Bohm long-term than Turner long-term, not to mention the age. You got a $300 million guy who's starting to get to the area where he's going to start declining, not getting better.
I'd have to agree with you. I'd rather move off the Turner contract. If Aiden Miller was so fantastic, they had to bring him up this year, I would consider moving Turner at the deadline. Like, this is just a hypothetical. I want to preface that. It's a hypothetical situation here. If Aiden Miller was so good, they were like, let's bring him up this year. And Dombrowski has alluded to, hey, like if they're the great ones, they come up and they're on you fast, right? They just sneak up on you and they could be great very quickly. And there's a chance Aiden Miller could be that guy. And he seems more comfortable playing shortstop than third base. So I think you would have to consider maybe moving off of that Turner contract. And especially if Bryson Stott, it came out today, like he was dealing with injury problems all of last year. So that's why he probably struggled for most of the season, especially at the dish. So if Stott's able to bounce back and he is playing much better and hitting the baseball much better, and Alec Bohm's hitting the baseball much better, and Aiden Miller can come up and you can get younger, Move off the Turner contract. Maybe add another bat in the outfield. You can replace that shortstop with Aiden Miller. I mean, the scenario's there where Miller could be the guy. I mean, he's going to be the guy down the line. He's not a prospect you have to trade. You could trade a Trey Turner right now.
Yeah, listen, here's the problem. Like Bryson Stott said, I guess he had elbow pain from like July all the way, or June all the way through the end of the season, so he wasn't all that productive. Did not have a very good year last year. Even if Bryson Stott comes back and has a really good year, you look at a situation where Trey Turner hitting in the lead. That's the one thing. Trey Turner moving to the leadoff spot. I was going to say, because if Stott's having a really good year, where are you hitting? You're still hitting him at the bottom half of the lineup here. So you're looking at the top of that lineup. Trey Turner's likely going to hit leadoff now. So you really need to get Trey Turner to have kind of a breakout type of. He has not really had that break. He had the August month where he got the ovation, all that stuff. He hasn't even been an all-star player here.
No.
It's not that hard to make an all-star game in the majors when you're, you're a certain level of guy. He's not even making the all-star game. He's not even an all-star player, Trey Turner, right now. So, yeah, I mean, it all makes sense to say, hey, he's been a very good player for us. We got to move on. You got Bryson Stott, a young player, Aiden Miller, a young player. Put those two guys together and let them be the pairing for the next whatever. It's not a slight on Trey Turner. It's just you're just being smart. He's the older guy here, and the amount of money he's on. Look, in all walks of life, when you're the guy making the money, you're the most susceptible to be cut because you're the guy making the money. So when you sign those big deals, you also have to be ready to be the guy who is likely to get cut or moved because of the amount of money you're making.
Yeah, and listen, I mean, he's not lived up to that contract. He's not as been productive as you thought he would be. I mean, listen, he started off with a bag in the World Baseball Classic. It's like he's hitting home runs. It's like, oh man, we're really getting an MVP level player right here. And then
you never got that guy though.
You never got him. That's what I mean. You've never gotten that type of guy. It started off like, oh my gosh, he's going to be fantastic. He started off horrible. Then you had the 18 ovations before he hit the home run. I think people forget that he had like all these. There was multiple ovations before he hit that home run. It wasn't one. It was multiple ovations. So it took him a few ovations to hit that home run, by the way. And I think he's a guy that really has to have a big year. And listen, I'm not in love with him leading off. Like, I like Schwarber leading off. They win games. I understand they fell apart in the postseason. I don't think that really has much to do with Schwarber leading off. I mean, they win games when he's leading off. It's everyone else. They just fall apart and they just go cold. So I don't think, I mean, you could tinker with the lineup and see they had problems with that when they tried it a couple of years ago. I don't know. But Turner, I mean, this is a massive year for Trey Turner because if he doesn't have a big time year with that contract, he's getting into his 30s now. He's going to start to be in the back end of his prime. That's something you got to watch for. And when you have Aiden Miller waiting in the ranks, Bohm's here till 26. He's 28 years of age. I think you keep him cheaper. And if he continues to hit the baseball well and is healthy, when he's healthy, he was hitting great last year. I mean, that's something you have to consider.
Nobody's going to want that contract. So you might consider it all you want. Everybody's talking about what we're talking about. Look at that contract. 11 years, $300 million. When they signed him to it, yeah, the euphoria's there. We got Trey Turner. And then he doesn't get off to the start you wanted him to, and you start to pick at it right away. And, I look at it right away and say, this guy was never a $300 million player. Like, he just had no business getting a $300 million con. Not one season he has ever had suggest I should pay that guy $300 million. None. Zero. Not even close. He's barely a $100 million player.
They overpaid. What can you say? They overpaid to get him here. Bryce wanted him here. We know how much of a voice Bryce has in this organization. Big TikTok guy now. Bryce Harper is. So, I mean, I'm excited.
Well, Bryce should stay out of GM decisions because he's put them into a lot of bad contractual situations.
I'll say one right off the bat, Mike. Rhys Hoskins. Him going to first base, letting Rhys Hoskins walk. That is destroyed the dynamic of this lineup. I mean, you lost a right-handed bat. And now you have a hole in the outfield. It's destroyed the lineup.
Hoskins wasn't very good last year. I get the point that you're making, but I don't know that Hoskins, he did not bounce back very well from that injury last year.
But if he stayed in Philadelphia, I mean, it could have been different.
By the way, on the Trey Turner thing,
yeah,
as a leadoff hitter, he has hit leadoff more times than any other spot in the lineup. And that includes that he's never hit leadoff really here. Hitting leadoff, he has had 487 games hitting leadoff, 472 games hitting second. So about the same, but more as a leadoff hitter than any other spot. His batting average is .302 with a .350 on-base percentage. As a number 2 hitter, his batting average is .292 with a .344 on-base percentage. So his numbers are better as a leadoff man than they are in the number 2 hole. Now, his power numbers are better in the 2 spot. He has 80 homers at 2, 69 homers at 1, but they're close. So I guess the question is, you had all those leadoff homers from Schwarber. You're still getting some power from that spot, but will Schwarber now have more guys on base if he has Turner and Harper and Bohm hitting in front of him?
Well, that was always the question with Schwarber not leading off, right? Like, we'll have more players on base, right? Like, we'll have more guys in front of him. But that's just to start the game. He's getting more at-bats later in the game, Schwarber is. When you're in that leadoff spot, you'll have those more at-bats, and guys will be hitting in front of you. So it really depends on the bottom half of the lineup. They're getting on base for Schwarber, because then some of those home runs could turn into, 2 runs, 3-run home runs for Schwarber. So that's I think the preface there is, okay, if the bottom of the lineup was getting on base in that 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th innings, then maybe Schwarber's turning those home runs into 2-run, 3-run home runs. So I think that's part of it too. You can't just look at the top of the lineup when you start the game either. And those numbers with Turner, I mean, they're close. You know what I mean? And he's hitting he has better power numbers in that 2 hole. So I mean, you could try it, but it was a comfortability thing with Schwarber before.
Yeah, guess what? I have no problem with Schwarber hitting leadoff. I've never been that guy, but they got to do something to this lineup. They can't keep going back with the same roster and the same lineup. So if you're going to bring the same cast of characters back, you got to shake it up a little. So I'm a proponent of shaking it up, because you can't give me the same team and the same lineup, because you've already proven it's not good enough.
Yeah, I mean, they have to do something, right? And Max Kepler is going to be my new Austin Hayes for this season, probably. So we'll see how that shakes out and that plays heading into the season. All right, got to go to nugget number 2. I want to stick with the Phillies and JT Realmuto real quick. This is a fascinating scenario. I mean, you've heard contract talk, extension maybe for JT. JT's a catcher. He's caught a lot of innings. He's gotten hurt. He's already had the knee surgery last year. I mean, they have to be really careful of what's going to happen with JT Realmuto this year, because you got to watch his innings. You got to watch how many games he is going to play this year and catch. I think that's also part of tinkering the lineup, Mike, is the Realmuto question. How much is he going to have to DH this year? Or do you also try him at first base, move Bryce to a DH position, and try that lineup every once in a while? Because you got to limit JT's innings and his games behind the dish. I mean, he's getting beat up back there. He's caught so much. I think this is something they should have started years ago, and you and I have talked about that before.
No doubt. I mean, the problem has been they don't have a suitable backup catcher to give that guy more innings. Now, when JT got hurt, you had to catch Garrett Stubbs, and people were complaining about that. Marshawn, he ended up getting hurt. They just don't have a legitimately legitimate backup catcher that you feel solid about giving extra playing time. Now, I do think you have to start, they're talking about playing him in left field and maybe even first base.
First base I could see, but left, that's a stretch for me.
That doesn't make a whole heck of a lot of sense. But to try to find, JT's bat is not a thing that I have to have in the lineup every single day. To me, I'm not like going out of my way to put him in spots where we're going to be worse defensively, because his bat doesn't deserve to be in the lineup like that. So to me, I catch him 3 to 5 days a week. Some weeks you do 3, some weeks 5, some weeks 4. But I'm definitely getting him out from behind the plate more. But that doesn't mean I have to put him in left field or even first base. He just doesn't play. The bat's not quality enough to have that he has to be in the lineup every day, especially not over Schwarber or Harper. And at the expense of hurting the defense.
Yeah, I mean, the offensive production is dipped. I mean, it's obvious. I mean, he's in his mid-30s. He's a catcher. I mean, this is what happens. And I don't think the Phillies prepared for this good enough. I really don't. I think they should have started this a couple of years ago where they were, all right, playing him at first base, DH and here and there, giving him more days off. That's how you extend a catcher's lifespan behind the plate. I mean, he's already had knee surgeries. I mean, this is something you have to consider. And the fact that there's rumblings about a contract extension, that gives me pause as well. I know they don't have really any other catchers in the farm, and there's not a ton out there right now, and they don't have a backup, but a suitable backup, I should say. The Chiefs viable officer with Garrett Stubbs. I mean, it's a great story. We love when he's partying during the postseason, but I mean, he's not a quality backup where you feel real comfortable trotting him out there more so this year.
Not at all. In fact, I'm not even sure that he is the backup catcher. He does have an option that he can go to the minors now.
Yep.
I think the Phillies, take that option, send him down, and hope that Marchand can stay healthy because he's the better player at this point.
He definitely is. All right, final nugget before I get out of here. Did you watch any of the NBA All-Star game last night? Any of it?
I did. It was horrible.
So I turned it off, by the way. I went to SNL. I was watching the SNL 50 over the All-Star game just because I couldn't take it. The Kevin Hart cameos during the game. You even saw SGA, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. He was telling Kevin Hart to shut up because that was annoying. They had Mr. Beast come out and do a $100,000 giveaway. I'm sure some of you in the audience have no idea what I'm talking about, who Mr. Beast is. He's the biggest YouTuber on the planet. He gives stuff away. They're doing that during the game. The tournament stuff, it's a total mess. However, hockey got it right. NBA, nada.
Yeah, I agree. All the stoppages between, they had the whole thing with the gone fishing for Barkley, and then that was really awkward. You're right, Kevin Hart. I don't know how he keeps getting jobs. Enough with the Kevin Hart stuff. It's almost clownish. It was cringy watching him out there. I'm over Kevin Hart. I know he's a Philly and Eagle guy, yada yada. Don't care. I don't need him. I didn't need the stoppage. I don't need the four things. The whole NBA All-Star weekend needs to be scrapped. Either get rid of it or go back to what you do. I know everybody's talking about do the USA versus the world. I don't think the U.S. players want to do that because they won't beat the world, quite
They'll
frankly.
lose.
Yeah, exactly. So I don't know what you do with it, but that was bad last night. And yes, I did watch it only because I wanted to see how cringy bad it was. And I said only the NBA could make a bad product and make it worse.
Yeah, I had to turn it off. I was out. I was totally out on it. I could not take it anymore. It was that brutal. It was that brutal, Mike. So bad job by the NBA. I'm done. I'm done with their All-Star game. They got to find some way to fix it. And LeBron, how about him calling out right before the game and calling out of work essentially right before he started? Could have gave someone else a chance.
Could have gave someone else a chance that you didn't want to see anyway.
Yeah, I was going to watch anyway, so doesn't matter.
All right, they're the Nuggets. They're brought to you by the Fanatic Sportsbook at Ocean Casino Resort in Atlantic City. Thanks, Nick.
Peace, Mike. Have a good one.
All right, he's back again tomorrow with another edition of Nick's Nuggets here on the Sports Bash Live. And, of course, this hour of the Sports Bash, we've got so much more to go. Eagles getting ready for a very important offseason, and the Phillies are down at spring training. Full squad workouts start today. What are you looking forward to now that the Eagles season is done? And here's a question for everybody out there. Had this out on the X platform at Mike Gill Show. How many current Philadelphia Eagles are Hall of Famers? Let me know. Final hour of the show. What's up, everybody? Sports Bash Live, 97.3 ESPN. I'm Mike Gill. So a couple of the thoughts we got on the table for you out there. Eagles season is officially in the books. The parade is behind us. So what's the big sports story you're getting ready for next? Is it the Phillies at spring training? Is it the Sixers hoping that they turn around their season? The Flyers, maybe they get hot, make a little playoff run here for you? Or is it the Eagles offseason? I think Eagles offseason probably the winner, right? 609-403-0973. Also threw this out on the X platform over the weekend. Got a lot of reaction to it. From the Eagles Super Bowl winning team, when you win a Super Bowl, you start to look at the future and immortality, Hall of Fame. The Eagles have now been to 2 Super Bowls. Some of these guys have won 2. Lane Johnson, Brandon Graham, Jake Elliott, Howie Roseman. How many players on the current Philadelphia Eagles roster are Hall of Famers? I got 2 lockdowns. I'm going Lane Johnson and Saquon Barkley. I think those 2 guys are definitive Pro Football Hall of Famers. Now, I think there's guys who are going to be in the conversation. I think there's guys that are peaking or on the right plane to get there. Jalen Hurts is an interesting one. Now, some people messaged me and said they think Hurts is going to be a Hall of Famer. He has 2 Super Bowl appearances, 1 win, a Super Bowl MVP, and pretty much the numbers are going to start getting there. You've got the numbers of Jalen Hurts in terms of rushing, the amount of rushing, touchdowns, all of those things. So is Jalen Hurts a future Hall of Famer? Let me read off some of the tweets I got at Mike Gill Show on the X platform. Let's see. Jalen Hurts is going to be on the Hall of Fame. He has a ring, Super Bowl MVP, will most likely retire with the most rushing touchdowns or be top 2. Do we think Jalen Hurts is more likely a Hall of Famer or less likely a Hall of Famer?
I think he's certainly on the trajectory. I think it depends on how long does he maintain a level of production that would be considered good. And I say that because of the fact that we know the Pro Football Hall of Fame is not the exclusive club that it used to be, to the point where people are literally arguing and screaming for Eli Manning to be in there. So,
well, Eli Manning, the reason they're screaming for him is that he has 2 Super Bowl wins and MVPs.
And the thing with Hurts is that if his career keeps going the direction it is, he will have much better regular season numbers than Eli. So
record will be far better than Eli.
Well, also the touchdown to interception ratio will be far better as well. Eli was an interception machine some of those years. So, it's very weird that you have to have this conversation because
Eli's an interesting one. He is 11th all-time in passing yards for whatever you think that is worth.
I mean, I'm sure if we went down the list of guys in passing yards, top 20, I'm sure there's a bunch of stat compilers on there like Drew Bledsoe and Vinny Testaverde. So, the passing yard thing is weird.
Testaverde 16, Bledsoe 19.
Yeah, they're both in the top 20. So it's kind of like one of those deals where you're like, what is the value of passing yards anymore in a league where everybody is chucking it?
Eli Manning's also 11th all-time in career passing touchdowns,
which probably is more valuable. I don't remember exactly what his interception ratio is, but I know his INTs were high.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I'm not a big Eli to the Hall of Fame guy. I'm just giving you the devil's advocate of some of the numbers that you put him in there for. Passing yards, he's number 11 all time. Touchdowns, he's number 11 all time. His record is 500. He does have 2 Super Bowl championships and MVP. So I think that's where Eli gets the support of stat compiler and had 2. And I've always said the opposite, the other side of the coin for me on Eli is he had really 2 amazing weeks of his 2 amazing months of his life.
Right.
I can't put you in the Hall of Fame based on 2 amazing months. You take those 2 months away, and you were you were a very good quarterback, not a Hall of Famer.
Right, exactly. And the problem is that the Hall of Fame is not the Hall of the best, it's the Hall of the very good that we like.
Yeah, so, I mean, for me, Eli is not a Hall of Fame level player. Now, Jalen Hurts, if you start to look at his numbers, this is where it's going to be interesting. Hurts has the Super Bowl. He has the MVP. He's been to a Super Bowl.
Right.
When you start to look at his numbers, though, is it going to be passing numbers? Is it going to be passing? He's going to be one of these quarterbacks that you're going to have to also incorporate the rushing. We're not to that quarterback yet in the Hall of Fame conversation. That, the evolution of the quarterback has not retired enough yet to where the rushing quarterback is in the conversation for Hall of Fame. You know how many years we hear the running quarterback never wins a Super Bowl? Well, you just had Jalen Hurts, who I think is, thought of as a running quarterback who also is a very good thrower of the football. He's kind of the balance now. He can run and he can throw. But there really isn't that quarterback who is a runner first that is up for the Hall of Fame yet.
Yeah, I mean, the problem is that, a guy like a Michael Vick, because of the trajectory of his career, is never going to get into the Hall of Fame. So there is a perception that a certain style of player just is not good enough or not capable enough.
You think Vick should have been in the Hall of Fame, or he should be considered? I was going to say.
No, I'm just saying the trajectory of his career never put him in that conversation. You know what I mean? Because of the injuries, because of the legal issues off the field. To me, the guy who could have been considered but never really got a sniff was Randall Cunningham, because Randall had almost 30,000 passing yards in his career. But the problem is because of how his career went, he basically had 3 really good years, and that was it. So we haven't had, up until recently, Lamar Jackson, these mobile quarterbacks consistently have really good seasons.
Are you a proponent of Steve McNair getting into the Hall of Fame?
No, because I think McNair is in the Hall of very good. To me, McNair, and I loved McNair. I know he's an MVP and everything, but
1 MVP, 3 Pro Bowls, but I would agree. I mean, 30,000 passing yards, 174 touchdowns, a lot of interceptions, 119.
It's the interceptions, but it's also the fact that when
he was a winner, though.
But also, some of those interceptions came at bad times in games. You go back and watch some of those Titans games, and you realize that for as many games that he did win, he lost some games too. He wasn't like one of these guys who was consistently clutch.
609-403-0973. Guys, if you're talking trajectory, Smitty is on that path. Considering everything he's accomplished since losing the state championship in high school, it'd be a nice cherry on the top of the sundae, and he's very short in his career so far, yeah. I think you've almost put A.J. Brown ahead of Devontae Smith.
Why? Because of his body type, or is it because of what you just feel like?
It's nothing to do with his body type.
Well, I mean,
I'm not putting you in the Hall of Fame based on your physique.
Well, no, I'm saying, do you think he can sustain a longer career because of his body type?
No, A.J. Brown, I'm just simply going off of his resume. I don't care what his body type looks like. I go what you're saying. You're saying, no, I'm talking about what they've done so far. Devontae Smith and A.J. Brown, AJ has 7,000 yards receiving. He's going to go over 10,000 yards at some point here. Smith is at 4,000. Smith has 27 career touchdowns. AJ Brown has 49 career touchdowns. He's almost double the amount of touchdowns. I mean, to me, now Brown's played 6 years. Smith has played, 4?
4 years for Smith.
Right, so they're 17-game averages. Smith is 83 catches. Brown is 84 catches. Brown is 1,300 yards. Smith is just over 1,000. Brown is 9 touchdowns. Smith is 7 touchdowns. So Brown's numbers are just a little bit better everywhere, but he has 5 out of his 6 seasons of over 1,000 yards, and he has 1,400 yards twice. Devontae's best year is 1,196.
Right.
So to me, Brown just has the better resume, period. Now, does that mean that Smith can't pump it into another gear, it's going to be really hard for him
Well, that's what I was
with
asking
Brown
you.
across from him the rest of it, at
Yeah.
least for the next couple seasons.
Well, that's why I was asking about the longevity, because to me, a lot of these receivers,
Well, real
the
quick,
prereq-
Smith
yeah.
is 26, Brown is 27. I think we act like Smith is Brown is only 27 years old. He's only 1 year older than
Sure.
Smith is. So they're both going to probably play about the same amount of years left.
No, I totally get that. But my point is, it's longevity to me. These guys have to get to certain numbers to even be in the conversation. Like, for example, one of the arguments with the most recent process was about a guy like Torrey Holt, right? Torrey Holt put up big numbers for a long period of time. But is Torrey Holt a Hall of Famer, right? In a lot of these receivers, how do we differentiate, right? You have a lot of receivers put up a lot of big numbers in their careers because we're in a passing era. So to me, in order for you to differentiate yourself, you got to play a long time and put up those numbers.
Well, I mean, listen, 8,000-yard seasons for Torrey Holt. He ended up with 13,000 yards. I think when it's all said and done, A.J. Brown's probably going to pass his number.
You think he's going to pass him?
Well, I mean, he's at 7,000 now. That means if he gets another 1,000 yards 3 more times, he's at 10,000. He's 27. So if the next 3 years, he should go over 10,000. Then the question becomes, can he get 3,000 more yards in that back half of his career where in Torrey Smith's last 3 years, at 31, 32, and 33 years old, he had 1,200 yards, 800 yards, and I'm rounding up, by the way, and 750 yards. So Brown could approach those numbers. Now, 74 touchdowns for Torrey Holt. He had a 12-touchdown season, a 10-touchdown season twice. So A.J.'s going to have to pump up the touchdowns a little bit, right? He's only at 49. The problem is, the Eagles don't pass, or they didn't pass nearly as much as the greatest show on turf teams.
Right, and the reason why we're going to bring up the longevity is because a guy who's currently playing, who I think is a future Hall of Famer, is Mike Evans. Because Mike Evans right now,
Mike Evans is 1,000%.
but Mike Evans, he's 31 years old. But from 21 to 31, he has 1,000 yards every single year. The guy has 1, 2, 3,
Got
4,
11 in a row.
6 seasons of double-digit touchdowns. But he's able to get those numbers because he's playing for all these years. So to me, one of the keys for A.J. And yes, A.J. Brown was the 1, 2, 3, the 5th guy I wrote on my list.
Yeah, but Mike Evans isn't a compiler. He's
No,
got
but
1,000 yards in all 11 seasons that he's ever played. Not to mention, he has 105 touchdowns. So he's a double-digit touchdown. 11 this year, 13 last year, 14,
That's what I said,
13,
yeah.
12. He's not even a question whether or not he's a Hall of Famer.
I know that, but what I'm saying is, to me, Mike Evans is the goalpost. He's the goal. If you're A.J. Brown and you want a Hall of Fame career, your number's got to get close to him.
Torrey Holt has more yards than he does.
He does.
So somewhere in that
But
range.
Evans has more touchdowns.
Yeah, Evans has more touchdowns. 1,200 yards, over 12,684 yards for Mike Evans. I think that's about where A.J. Brown can get to.
Okay.
He's got 4,000. No, he's got 7,000 now. 3 more seasons of 1,000 puts him over 10.
Mm-hmm.
And then he'll be at 30 years old. How productive can he be after his 30-year-old season?
Right.
And he should be able to get 2,000 yards if he plays until, like, Mike Evans is 31.
Yep.
If A.J. Brown, who is in his 6th year, next year will be his 7th. So 7th, 8th, and 9th, they will be his next 3. That should get him to 10,000. What will he do at 31, 32, 33 years old? That will be the big key for him. Because he'll have, I think, 10,000 yards going into his age 31 season.
And like I said, I think that his style of play and his body type is going to help A.J. Brown get to those numbers, because I think that his game is not dependent on speed like some guys. To me, it's the guys whose games are not dependent on pure speed, like the Larry Fitzgeralds, like the Mike Evans. A.J. Brown, to me, fits more into that category. You know what I mean?
He does. Well, he's a big physical guy. I mean, you take a look at Devontae Smith, 6 foot 170. A.J. Brown, 6'1", 226. I mean, that's a big difference.
Huge difference.
In terms of, now, he's had the knee problems. Is he going to be able to manage that and play full seasons? When you look at Devontae Smith, his numbers right now through 4 years, he's only got 1,000 yards twice. He was at 916. He was at 833 this year. He does have 27 touchdowns over 4 seasons, but his numbers are a little off some of those guys. So to go to the two receivers, I think Brown actually has a better trajectory than Smith does.
As I say, when you asked the question, I immediately wrote down the fourth name that came to my mind was A.J. Brown. Smith was the sixth name I wrote down. So
I have Lane Johnson 1.
I have Lane number 1.
I have Saquon Barkley 2.
I got Saquon 2 as well.
So then after that, you start to get into, and I'm not counting Howie Roseman and Jeffrey Lurie.
I'm not either. I'm going only players.
I think you start to get into way hypotheticals, the young guys.
Right.
Jalen Carter.
That was my number 3.
So he's a guy who could be on the path.
He is on a trajectory. If he plays the way he did this year and keeps getting better, he is definitely on his way to the Hall of Fame, because guys who are game wreckers are guys who become Hall of Famers. It's not the guys who have the nice steady careers to get into the Hall of Fame on the defensive line.
All right, I'll give you another name that I think is now on the trajectory, and that's Landon Dickerson.
He was the 5th name I wrote down.
Yeah, I would put Dickerson probably as my 3rd or 4th guy. Dickerson, 3 years in the league. This is his 4th. He has 3 out of 4 Pro Bowls. I know that's not that big of a deal, but he's already...
For offensive lineman, resume matters.
Right, exactly. So if I'm trying to figure out how do I vote for an offensive lineman, you're going to say, man, this guy was in the league 4 years. He made 3 Pro Bowls. He's now won a Super Bowl. So I think Landon Dickerson could be one of those guys that's like a 10-time Pro Bowler. Because, listen, he got into the league, played left guard, didn't make the Pro Bowl that first year. He wasn't a starter right off the bat. As he became the full-time starter, he's made the Pro Bowl 3 straight seasons. So you're looking at a guy who's a perennial Pro Bowler. Something that Jordan Mailata does not have.
That's why Mailata's not nowhere on my list. I wrote down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I wrote down 12 guys and I wrote down Mailata's name.
Well, I'd say Mailata's only because on X, people tweeted at me, Jordan Mailata could be a guy. Landon Dickerson, I think, is one.
Hall of Fame human being is Jordan Mailata. I don't know if he's a Hall of Fame football player.
So Dickerson, I think, would be on that trajectory.
Yeah, he was my number 5 name I wrote down.
Then you start to look at, all right, you got on the offensive side of the ball, Barkley, Jalen Hurts. I mean, Barkley and Lane, I think, are definites.
Yeah.
The next group would be Landon Dickerson, Jalen Hurts, A.J. Brown. I think Smith is kind of a long shot. Mailata, no. Juergens, probably not. Although, I mean, if he has like a 10-year career now as the center,
right?
Being a center, he could be viewed differently now, and he did make the Pro Bowl, and he's now a Super Bowl champion. So he was a Pro Bowl center. So if he goes and is a 10-time Pro Bowl center, that's a different story.
And I think he's better right now in his career compared to what Jason Kelce was at this age. So I think that helps too, that he's starting at a higher point.
He is 25 years old, by the way. So he could probably play center for another 10 years.
Right.
Maybe even 8 years. And if he's like a 7-time Pro Bowler at that spot, he would at least be under consideration.
And don't forget, most of Kelce's all-pro selections came in the second half of his career. The first half of his career, he had problems. He was not a great all-pro center. Most of, I think it's 5 of the 6 all-pros all came after the age of 28 for Kelce.
I'm looking at Jalen Carter's first 2 seasons in the league. 10.5 sacks. Next to a guy like Aaron Donald, okay, who's like the top of the list.
Right.
Aaron Donald's first 2 years in the league, he had 20 sacks. So he's doubled Jalen Carter if you're looking at the first 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
So, and by the way, right off the bat, he's Defensive Rookie of the Year. He is AP First Teamer 1, 2. Let's see. He is AP First Teamer. How many times? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 times in 10 years. So I know that's at the top of the list, but Jalen Carter has a little ways to go. he did make a Pro Bowl this year, so he is a one-time Pro Bowler. And now, at 23 years old, you could say, okay, he's made the Pro Bowl. He was a Defensive Rookie of the Year runner-up last year, second-team All-Pro this year. Fine. If you keep playing at this level, you might be on the trajectory.
Here's a different comparison for you. So Warren Sapp was not a Pro Bowler or an All-Pro until his third year in the NFL. He only had 12 sacks in his first 2 years combined, did Warren Sapp. So Sapp, the majority of his big years were from age 25 to, what was the
31.
31. So if Jalen Carter keeps doing what he's doing, he should theoretically surpass what Warren Sapp did.
Yeah, Sapp's probably a better comp. I mean, Aaron Donald's maybe the greatest of all time.
Right.
And Warren Sapp, you're right. First 2 years, nothing. Third year, he's a Pro Bowler, second-team All-Pro. And Jalen Carter, second-team All-Pro in his second year.
Right.
And he's younger than Sapp was when he front. So, yeah, I think Carter could be on the trajectory. Brandon Graham, no dice.
No.
Darius Slay is another one that people threw my way.
No, and even Slay has said on his podcast, he doesn't think that he has a Hall of Fame career.
Six-time Pro Bowl, Super Bowl, one-time All-Pro. So he does have the 1 year as an All-Pro. That was way back in 2017. Six-time Pro Bowler, kind of reinvented himself here in Detroit. He, was the best player on some bad teams,
right,
and then came here. But, yeah, I think, he's probably a guy that is, he did lead the league in interceptions once, 28 career interceptions, but I don't know that Darius Slay. Now, you could go look at the other side and say Quinyon Mitchell, year one, had a good enough season to be, okay, now I got to keep my eye on you.
Right. I think Quinyon Mitchell is in the jury is still out category, but he might be something.
Guys, is Jason Kelce a Hall of Fame player? I think he'll end up getting in for a couple of reasons. He was very good, Jason Kelce.
He's got the resume.
The accolades. 7 Pro Bowls, 6-time All-Pro, and he wins the Super Bowl, and he's highly popular.
The 6-time All-Pro is very key because every time you listen to people who vote on the Hall of Fame, they say that those All-Pros have a tremendous weight.
By the way, he was an All-Pro in his final 3 seasons.
That's what I was saying.
And
it's
four of the last 5, he was an All-Pro. Yeah, I mean, you heard what Adam Kaplan said on Friday. After the 2016 season, the Eagles were looking to trade.
Yeah.
Maybe before the 2016. It was right. It was either before
2015, 2016.
Yeah.
He had some rough games, and even Kelsey's talked about how he's surprised they didn't trade him.
So by the way, last season, Jason Kelce was a first-team All-Pro. Think about that at 36 years old. So yeah, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of his last 7 years. He was the first-team All-Pro center. I would assume that Jason Kelce, and not to mention, he's a very popular guy. Hate to say it, that helps.
It does help, but I do think that if he didn't have the All-Pros, we wouldn't be talking about it. I think the All-Pro thing is very, very important to these voters. Remember, that's part of the reason why this year's Hall of Fame class was smaller than usual, because some of the voters, like Gary Myers, came out and said that Gary Myers, Dan Fouts both said that, hey, we're voting on guys who we're not even really fully sure if their resumes, meet the smell test, basically.
Well, you got Eric Allen, who just got into the Hall of Fame, and I would say he was a 6-time Pro Bowler, first-team All-Pro. I don't know that, in my mind, Eric Allen is a Hall of Famer, but he's in. And you look at Quinyon Mitchell, the season that he just had, the problem with Quinyon Mitchell is going to be, Eric Allen, lot of interceptions.
Correct.
54 interceptions. Quinyon Mitchell, really, I don't think he had one during the regular season.
He had no interceptions in the regular season. His first career interception was in the postseason.
Yeah. So when you're looking at putting a corner in, what number do you look at?
Interceptions is usually the first number people look at, for better or for worse.
Yeah, that's where I feel like, okay, year one, Quinyon Mitchell had a great year, but is it noticeable enough to say, okay, I mean, I don't even know that did he get any accolades?
I mean, he was a finalist for Defensive Rookie of the Year, but he didn't win the award.
Right, exactly. He was Defensive Rookie of the Year runner-up. That's it. He had no interceptions. He finished the year with 12 pass breakups, no sacks, no interceptions, and 46 tackles. So if you just said, look, I'm a writer from Cleveland, and I'm voting on Quinyon Mitchell, and you're just going to Pro Football Reference, you're saying, well, how am I voting for this guy for the Hall of Fame, right? He didn't do anything that caught the attention other than he was really, really good, so no one threw his way. Now, you could, over time, if he has another couple years where that's the kind of year that he has, I think he'd start to get the attention.
And the problem is that if you look at a guy who is a Hall of Famer, who was a lockdown corner in recent years, was Darrelle Revis, right? His first year, he had 3 interceptions to Darrelle Revis. So even Revis didn't have a Ofer in his first 3 years of interceptions.
I was going to say, I went to Revis as well because he's the guy I wanted to see how little people threw at him because of his prowess, and he had interceptions. He finished his career with just 29 interceptions, but it was his third year where they're like, no one's throwing at this guy, and he became a first-team All-Pro 3 straight seasons there. So which current Eagles do we think are Hall of Famers? And I have another I have 2 more names that I think should be debated on. And you guys can text in yours as well, 609-403-0973. More Sports Bash coming up. All right, 533. Which current Eagles could end up in the Hall of Fame? Once you win a Super Bowl, you're on the trajectory of getting looked at if you're somebody who has had a solid career. What you do after that now gets looked at even closer. 609-403-0973. What do you guys think? So I got two more names that I want to throw out there, maybe debate a little bit. And somebody text this one in, and it's Jake Elliott. Jake Elliott is a two-time Super Bowl champion. He is one of the best postseason kickers of all time now. And now the problem with Jake Elliott is he doesn't have a lot of accolades. He is a one-time Pro Bowler. That is it. But he has made a ton of big kicks, a lot of playoff success in his career. He is 8 years in the league, and he has 2 Super Bowls. You take a look back at what? I guess you're looking at Vinatieri.
That's what I'm looking at right now. So Vinatieri had made 56 out of 69 postseason field goals. His longest was 53. Of course, we know he won a couple Super Bowls with that leg of his. But Vinatieri right now is not in the Hall of Fame.
Not yet.
Will he get there?
Don't know. Good question. How many kickers are in the Hall of Fame? That's another question.
I think there's only one. Let me double check.
Yeah, I was going to say, that's one of the problems with the kicker is there's not a lot of kickers that are in the Hall of Fame. So is Jake Elliott one of the more, I got to see where he is in terms of playoffs, right? What did you say for Vinatieri? Vinatieri had a lot of big game-winning playoff kicks.
It was at 59 out of 64.
59 out of 64. All right. Jake Elliott, 7 years in the playoffs, is, let's see, overall, he is 26 out of 27. He has missed one playoff kick in his career. He is 96% on field goals in his career.
There are 4 kickers in the Hall of Fame. Morton Anderson, George Blanda, Lou Groza, and John Sturridge.
So not a lot. Nobody recent. Morton Anderson's the most recent of that crew.
Yeah.
Not a discernible big game kicker either. Morton Anderson,
No.
I don't believe. He had all those years with the Saints, and then would he go to the Falcons?
Was it Morton Anderson or Gary Anderson that missed that kick for the
Gary
Vikings?
Anderson.
Gary Anderson, okay.
So Jake Elliott is 26 of 27 in his career. His long is 53 in the playoffs. He is 96% as a kicker. He has 2 Super Bowl championships. So I really, that's what somebody texted Elliott, and that's why I figured I'd bring him up.
Yeah, I'm not on the Elliott train because he still needs to get past David Akers on the Eagles list. And Akers is kind of like a fringe guy even in the conversation. If Elliott owns all the Eagles records, then we can have that conversation.
What are Akers' numbers? Because I would almost put Elliott ahead of him. Elliott, in his career, has made 196 field goals in 231 attempts. He has a long of 61. Now, he has other crazy longs, like 61, but other years, 56, 53, 54, 58, 56. He's made 61 twice. He is about 85%, 84.8. He is 196 for 231 in 8 seasons.
Just in an Eagles uniform, David Akers was 294 out of 357.
And how many seasons?
That was in 12 seasons in Eagles uniform. I'm only going Eagles uniform.
Right. So he has 4 extra years in Philadelphia. Now, what's his percentage?
His overall percentage in the Eagles uniform is 82.4%.
So Elliott's a little bit better there. The long, I'm assuming Elliott, well, he has 61.
Well,
so
Jake
Akers is not
Elliott
beating them.
owns the Eagles record for most 50-plus yard field goals made.
Right, that was another thing. Younger Jake Elliott, early in his career, that's what he was really known for. He could kick the long ones. Now, this year, for whatever reason, that kind of dissipated.
Well, that goes
a
back
little
to the
bit.
whole thing we talked about with what Bo Allen said, that he was playing through an injury.
Right,
and
last
all that
year, he
stuff.
was 7 of 8 from 50 more, 5 of 6 the year before, 3 for 3 the year before that. He was 2 for 5, 2 for 4, 2 for 5, 5 of 6. So he has been a very good kicker. In fact, he's 27 of 44.
And how old is he now?
missed 6 of them this year. He is currently, he'll be 30 years old next year.
I mean, kickers can kick for a long time.
Yeah.
So, I mean, if he gets whatever was wrong this year right, I'm not saying he can't put together another 8 really good years. I'm just saying that the number of kickers in the Hall of Fame doesn't help his case.
The 2 Super Bowls certainly puts him in the conversation with some of these
Vinatieri.
guys. Now, Vinatieri,
But the problem is Vinatieri isn't in yet. So, to me, Elliott needs Vinatieri to break that glass ceiling for him to get in.
yeah. All right, I got one more guy that I think is a real long shot. But
I'm curious to see if you name the guy that I have. Because there's one guy left that I have that you haven't named yet.
the last guy that I think, now this year will do nothing to put him on that trajectory, but you're saying, okay, based on what I saw and what could happen down the road, is Cooper DeJean.
Different name than I got. Let's hear it. Why Coop?
Well, Coop has an interception return for a touchdown in the Super Bowl. So now he has a moment, right? And we know the Hall of Famers that he's got a Super Bowl as a rookie. He has a moment. He is 22 years old. He's going to be a starter, you would think, for the next 10 years. He's super athletic. Interesting position, though. He does play nickel corner, which could change. Next year, if Slay's not here, he could be an outside corner.
He could.
Who knows? I don't know, just going off the fact that he has that big moment, young player, and I think the sky is the limit for him. I think his trajectory is just shooting upward. Goes back to the Quinyon Mitchell conversation, though. What numbers do you look at as, hey, look at what this guy did? That's the problem with the corner, but I definitely think, much like Quinyon Mitchell, you might look at these two guys together and be like, for 10 years, these guys were a unbelievable pairing. I don't think either one of them, but I think he's an interesting conversation.
It's definitely an interesting conversation. I don't discount it. And I do think that him getting that interception return for a TD in the biggest game of the year, in the biggest moment against one of the best quarterbacks ever lived, definitely, elevates his profile. The guy that I'm going with, though, Mike, C.J. Garner-Johnson. The man has already 18 interceptions in 6 seasons. 2 years separately in the Eagles uniform, he has 6 interceptions. So I think a man who's already only 27 years old, if you got 18 interceptions already in 6 years, if you continue this trajectory, let's say another 6 years, he's another 18 interceptions, he's at 36. Now you're kind of getting into that category with other safeties who could potentially maybe be in that Hall of Fame combo.
Yeah, I mean, sure. I guess numerically, your point is valid. He missed a whole year in Detroit. He was not that player in New Orleans. He basically has 2 years in Philadelphia that are worthy of anything. He has never been a Pro Bowler, let alone.
That hurts him. I agree.
Yeah.
But 6 interceptions, 2 different years is a
Yeah,
gaudy
and
number.
his 6, the first year he did in 12 games, and that led the league. So he has led the league in interceptions one time, but I can't put Chauncey Gardner-Johnson on the trajectory. I'm out on that.
Okay.
I'm not. I mean, look, he has 18 interceptions, 2 of them, 6. So he has 12 in 2 years.
Right.
But his first 3 years in the league, he had 5.
Now, he wasn't always playing safety in some of those years. There's kind of a bit of a, like a Rod Woodson vibe here where once he gets maybe into a better situation, maybe he compiles more. I don't know.
Mm-hmm. Now, listen, no, if he has another season next year where he has 6 and now he has 3, okay, that's different. He's also 27 years old, so he can play for another, 3-4 years, you would think at a high level. I just think
He'd
be a real long shot.
I'm just wondering if a guy like him for the next 5 years averages 5 interceptions a year. I'm just throwing out a number.
Mm-hmm.
And now you're putting him into that 40-plus interception category. Now you're kind of forcing people to pay attention. You know what I mean?
Sure. I guess one other guy is Zach Bond. He'd have to have 5-6 more years like he just had. So I'm not even suggesting. I'm just saying, if he has more years like the one he just had,
right.
The problem with that is I think he's
late
probably
start.
Late.
He's 26?
I
think he's 26, 27, isn't he?
Let me see. Zach Bond is 28.
Oh, he's even older than I thought.
I was going to say, I thought he was closer. So he'll be 28 next year. He'll play next year at 28. So 28, 29, 30. I mean, you're talking, if he has a year like he had last year.
How many tackles did he have last year again?
150.
All right, hold on. Let me look up something.
So he had 150 tackles last year. He was AP first team All-Pro. He would need, he just don't have enough time. He would need like 6 more seasons to what he just kind of did. I mean, maybe. I don't know. These voters are a little easier now, but he legitimately didn't do anything for 4 years. He had 151 tackles this year. He has 239 in his 5 years. Think about that. So he would be, now, if he played all 5 years the way he did this year, obviously you'd be talking about a guy on that trajectory. But
5 years, 150 tackles is still only 750. To just throw out a number. So Sam Mills for his career, Mike, had 1,265.
Yeah.
So he would still be 400 short, or 300 short, actually, of Sam Mills, who's in the Hall of Fame, who was a guy who was considered by some a controversial Hall of Fame guy because, he was more of a longevity guy than a single season, oh my goodness, every year kind of guy.
Yeah, so, no, I mean, listen, I'm not sitting here trying to convince anybody that Bond is a Hall of Famer, but he had a Hall of Fame season, and he would need to do that. The sand has gone through the hourglass on him, and that's the problem.
Sam Mills' final year in the NFL, by the way, had 38 years old, just to give a perspective. So Sam Mills had to get into his 38th year in the NFL to even get to that 1,265 total tackles.
That would be 10 more seasons for Zach Bond. He is 28 years old next year. So I think no on Bond, but unbelievable. He had a Hall of Fame season.
Wait, the 1 year?
Yeah. I mean, he could be like a Terrell Davis if he has like 5 more of those.
Yeah, the thing with Terrell Davis, though, is that those 5 years that he had were ridiculous.
First team All-Pro, Zach Bond. I mean, think about
Bond
it.
has 5 first-team All-Pro years, right?
151 tackles, 11 for loss, 4 pass breakups, 5 forced fumbles, a fumble recovery, an interception, 3.5 sacks. You have years like that, multiple of them. Whew. That was an unbelievable season. Although, how many? 3.5 sacks. I think he had 3 of them in the first week, didn't he?
I mean, Patrick Willis had 5 All-Pro seasons, and he had a shortened career. So, I mean, if Zach Bond can maybe match Patrick Willis's resume, maybe he's in the conversation.
Good conversation today. Enjoyed it. Sports Bash Live, 97.3 ESPN, the 97.3 ESPN free mobile app, live video streaming on the X platform and on YouTube. At Mike Gill Show, want to tell you about my friends at the Nizam's Indian Restaurant, Route 40, Egg Harbor Township. They're now offering a lunch buffet, 11:30 to 3, and you can check them out Monday through Friday, every day from 11:30 to 9:30, and that is right there in front of Boscov's. They are the number 2 ranked restaurant in all of New Jersey by NJ.com. Route 40, Egg Harbor Township. Visit thenizams.com for more information. All right, time for the Bet365 play of the day. I think we gave you a couple winners on Friday's show.
Yeah, you only gave out 2 official winners, Mike. It was UCLA and Indiana under. It actually was lower than people thought it was going to be. And then Nevada covered the 7.5. So now you are 109, 71, and 1.
109.
With the Bet365 play of the day.
109, 71, and 1. That's a lot of money right there. I like it. It's going to be hard for me to not break even.
You think?
109, 71. I give out losers for the next month and a half.
Don't kibosh yourself.
No. I got a couple winners tonight, though. Here you go. Duke, Virginia, under 132.5. I like Duke minus 13.5. I think Duke wins big tonight over. They just crushed Stanford. They're playing well. I
What's
like
the
Duke
spread?
tonight.
13?
13.5. Under 132.5. Kansas State plus 2.5 tonight against Utah. They are my Bet365 plays of the day. It's a lot of wins. 109, 71, and 1.
It's a lot of vacation money.
Yeah, we'll do it again tomorrow.
A lot of beer money.
It's a lot of. It's a lot of winning. That's what it is. I hope everybody's playing these out there because I'm not.
It's your own fault.
All right, we'll do it again tomorrow. Good show today. Thanks to McGarry, Bob Wankel, Johnny Mack, Jeff Mosher, and, of course, the Nuggets right here on the Sports Bash Live on 97.3 ESPN. Severance, it's on Apple TV+, but they're only releasing like one episode a week. So I'm caught up now, but now I got to wait for the next episode to come out, which doesn't come out until Friday.
Yeah, I'm going through the same problem with Will Trent on Hulu.
Yeah, what's going on with that?
These cliffhangers are killing
Yeah,
me.
you got to do I want to binge it. I don't want to watch it every week. If I want to do that, I go back to cable.
Exactly.
All right, Josh has game night next and Duke, Virginia tonight on 97.3 ESPN. Have a great night, everybody.